Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda. Happy to be with you this evening. We're back for a long-awaited sequel, voted on by, that's right, the Knights of Last Call Patreon members, who decided that boss battles was the way to go. Yeah, we're going to have some interesting things to say about this. As you can see, the LED project is still in process. I discovered that I'm going to have to do some soldering, so I have to find my soldering iron, where the hell that is, so I can wire some jumpers so I can make this thing work. But, you know, project continues to go unabated. So that is coming. Just ordered several $100 of high quality acoustic insulation foam, which we're going to be putting up at the studio to try to help with some of the echoey reverb that's occurring up there now that we've got our new studio set up. So we're just, we're trying to attack the problems one at a time. Before we get into anything too deep tonight, I do really quickly want to take a few moments of everybody's time to express my incredibly deep gratitude to the members of the Knights of Last Call Patreon. Over the last several months, we have had a tremendous increase in the number of people who have decided to join our Patreon, upgrade their existing Patreon account to our champion level, our hero level. These are, these are our high, these are our hero and champion tiers. These are our cream of the crop. This was our highest possible option. And, we just saw an incredible outpouring of support from so many people. Self-confessed cynic is in the chat, and he says, we are back. So, that level of support has always been incredible from this Patreon. And, we had heard from a long time that we had some patrons who wanted some extra, features. They wanted some extra, options in the Patreon. There's some people who just, quite frankly, wanted to give us some more money. And, kind of with their blessing, we had a variety of conversations. We called them the Great Councils with some of the members of this community to try to figure out what the right size is, because it's not something I take very lightly. But we decided to roll out a limited edition number of high super premium tiers. We rolled out a $50 Exalted level, and we rolled out a $100 Legend level. And OBS keeps jumping out, and I'm keep losing OBS. Hopefully that's not affecting you guys. Anyways, I don't know if I have a problem with my internet or not, but hopefully not. Anyways, maybe there's some storms in this area, so maybe we're going to have a little bit of flickering here and there, but that's all right. Yeah, I got a notification that OBS it said it disconnected, and then it said it immediately reconnected. So I don't know if that's on me, or it doesn't look like I dropped any packets. So it must be a problem with the YouTube. To the stream health. I don't know. Okay, anyways. Again, I rolled these out very cautiously because, I want to make sure that people get this, a great experience for their value, for their money, and, blown away. We're going to try to come up with a cool way to give these people a big shout out. As we go through our streams, I really do want to call to attention the fact that they have taken it upon themselves to just, quite frankly, just donate a lot of money to this channel, which is, it's not all about the money. It really isn't. But it is a big financial commitment, and I really appreciate that. So I want to specifically call out, I want to call out Zul, Simosama, Sean, Mundar, Amrid, Low Class, The Unfortunate Pumpkin himself, John Bonanza, Darth Gorlock, Booth Bay, Hawkeye, Ben A, Whipplestein, Ryan Dale, Rick Sherman, Laughing Outlaw, GM Scott, Donnie Taylor, Kerumak, and Gold Cat for taking it upon themselves to upgrade their accounts to this incredible level of support. And I can only hope that, I can make it worth it, and I can make it fun for you, and I can make it fun for everybody involved, and that you get a lot of value out of it. Because obviously it is a big commitment from you, and it's a huge upgrade for us. We've always sort of teetered around the line of profitability with this channel. We have some good months. When we have a good month, it's almost always because you guys all came out and tipped and supported us, and that that's always really awesome. And then, but now, I'll be honest with you, we're going to be able to make some money off of this thing, and I'm going to be able to give that money back to folks like Bob and Aaron, who are just killing it with the Northern Reaches mega campaign. And I don't know, maybe. I never thought that this would be something that I could ever even reasonably consider that might one day be my job. But with supporters like you all, from the $3 of a Squire to the $100 of a Legend, it all adds up. From the $2 tip to the $5 super chat to the $7 or $8 YouTube membership. I mean, all of these things at the scale. I mean, we're a small group. We're talking about very niche topics. We're not doing the big boy and girl D&D commentary or whatever it is that everybody does to get the hundreds of thousands of followers. I'm not cosplaying. So, the fact that you're here means a lot to me, and I really, really appreciate it. And Whipplestein, giving me $20 on a super chat, says, appreciate all that you guys do at KLC and the awesome community in the Discord and Northern Reaches. Yes, thank you, Whipplestein. Thank you for your incredible amount of support that you have given me, you've given this channel. I can only hope that you find it to be worthwhile and a community worth investing in. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. So I'm not going to get too overly sentimental and sappy about this. But needless to say, I was pretty stunned. I was pretty shocked. And if you look back, there have been a few moments in this channel's history where I was kind of at a loss for words, which is obviously a pretty big rarity for someone like me who just blabbers on and on and on. This week has been one of those. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who comes out and supports us here, watches our videos, and hangs out with us live. So again, very exciting week for us here. Just a lot of cool things going on in the future, and we're really looking forward to it. And we're gonna keep on keeping on. All right. So, real quick, I do see that we have a lot of people here in chat. Frostjack is here. Hello, Frostjack. Hoping to see some 4E love today, not just Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Yeah, I'm hoping. I will say we are going to talk a little bit about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That is going to happen. But outside of that, there is definitely some, what would I say, more philosophical concepts that I think definitely need to be addressed and should be addressed. That kind of apply to anything and everything. Not just Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but apply to from 4th Edition to Legend of the Five Rings. We just sort of had a boss fight in Legend of the Five Rings last week, and I think we're going to definitely talk about that. So yeah, we'll definitely get there. Claude, hello. Ayla, good evening to you as well. KC is here. Sup? KC. Melissa, hello. Let's see, D Priest is here. What's up, D Priest? Blood Earnest. Damien says that thing makes you sound like you're 3 miles away from your mic at the studio. Well, I am 3 miles away from my mic at the studio because it's a shotgun mic that's positioned overhead of me. So we're going to fix that. Zerberus, hello. Adrian, hello to you as well. George Harris, Karuma. Yes, Damien, we've got an exalted spot saved for you. Don't worry about that. Joe says PF 2nd Edition seems to have way too many boss battles. Most battles in their APs are versus one stronger enemy. Rarely do you fight a mob. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about my personal beliefs on Pathfinder 2nd Edition's boss battle concept, and we'll kind of get into that. Gossamer says hello. Drop for a second. Yes, again, hopefully we don't have too many of those more issues. Thank you, Gossamer, for your continued support. Pumpkin has no business being on that list. Someone take away his credit cards. The whole crew signed up for Exalted from them, and so you know what? They're doing it. They're doing it right. Right. I'm not cosplaying yet. I've got the cosplay ready to go. Look, I cosplayed once. I brought it up to the studio, my little hat for Leshies. Sentimental tears or we leave. Damien with his members super chat says you should do a first look at the game I sent you today at the end of the stream. Should take you like 10 minutes long. I downloaded it, Damien, and I was like, wow, this is only a 30-page module, and yet they somehow managed to waste the first 10 pages of it with fiction and what is a role-playing game. And then I closed it. So I didn't actually get to any of the actual content of it yet. I'm thinking of snagging Last Exalted, at least for the period of time until my wife asks, what the fuck is a Patreon? Good question. Is this going to be about the 20-page PDF you showed us last year, where bosses in Pathfinder had more actions according to the number of players and acted more times per turn? If so, I'm in. Well, Luke, we're actually going to talk about a couple of things. Yes, I mean, this is kind of a follow-up to what we did last year. And honestly, it's a little bit about some of the lessons I have learned. And honestly, some of the ways that I now think I was wrong. And I think that there are things that I've learned. There are things that, I guess there were things that I was wrong about. And I've learned about that work about Pathfinder 2 battles and don't work. And sort of what my approach has been since I've had some of these experiences with some of these Pathfinder battles. All right. So let's kind of start off briefly with this idea of what is a boss battle? Why would we want to use a boss battle? Because fundamentally, we all understand that like it is part of this sort of, especially if you're talking about your traditional heroic fantasy. And it really, really is sort of a trope of the genre that you end up with this sort of many people of the party versus one big, strong monster. I mean, that has been the case since even the beginning of D&D. Usually there was one final villain, even back in the 1970s, that you typically would fight against. And, that has become a staple of video game genre, and it become a staple of all this. However, I believe fundamentally that there are many problems with this inside of the TTRPG space that really need to be addressed. So let us go to the whiteboard. So what I'm going to talk about here is we might come back to this, but one of the things I want to talk about is sort of walk you through sort of the big end boss of Northern Reaches Season 1, which is Triune. And I kind of want to talk about why this was a failure. It was a success in that everybody had a great time and that it was an amazing, experience. But from a game design standpoint, I don't think it really succeeded. Although there were things that I tried to have succeed in, Shadram says, oh, cool. I have a milestone chat too. I hope I don't waste it. Don't worry. You did not. Thank you for your member chat, Shadram. Thank you for your continued support. All right. Yeah. I think we had another drop as well. People were having problems with our stream the other day when last week when we streamed from the studio. But that was at the studio. I'm at home. So I wonder if there's a problem with some of the YouTube servers. Because I'm not showing any drop frames. So, all right. Anyways, as long as it's intermittent, I'm not going to freak out about it. Okay. So fundamentally with our boss battles, the main concept of this, the main problem with this, or idea is you have this one versus many, right? And this is the party. Now, why is this problematic in most TTRPGs? Well, the main reason that you're going to have a problem with this is because number one, it lacks some of, I think, the key elements that make a combat interesting or exciting. For the first thing and the most important thing that it lacks is it lacks, in many cases, it lacks what I'm going to call tactical depth. All right. Tactical depth is, and we've talked at length on this campaign or on this stream about 4th edition monster design, 4th edition encounter design, which I think are, extremely brilliant. And just as like a quick summary, the idea of a 4th edition encounter design is that, you've got your room where the fight is going to occur. If I could draw better, there we go. You have your room where the fight is going to occur. You've got the PCs coming in from this side of the room. You've got some artillery monsters in the back who can dish out a tremendous amount of damage, but are quite weak. They have low hit points, low armor class. And so, the party ideally would love to rush across the room and engage those artillery monsters that are weak and destroy them quickly before they could do too much damage. But between you've got a bunch of big brutes who, have grapple and constrict and attack of opportunity and a bunch of buttload of hit points and do a bunch of damage on their own, that are kind of gumming up the works and, sort of blocking it. And so now the PCs have this kind of tactical depth to this encounter, where, you'd basically it's asking the question, which target do we engage? What do we go for here? Should we split up? Should we all focus on the brutes first? But that doesn't feel like that's what we should be doing. I guess we should try to go for the artillery monsters in the back of the room, but then we're giving the brutes free reign to, say, maybe, rampage through our spellcasters who we kind of left behind. Or maybe the brutes are going to really, gum us up and keep us sort of tanked down and sort of crowd controlled. So that doesn't really feel ideal. So you end up with a situation where no choice feels correct. And the party has to kind of decide what plays to our strengths, what plays to our, what are our weaknesses? How do we overcome this sort of tactical depth? And really what it comes down to is in many instances, it's a question of, target engagement. What targets are we going to prioritize, or I should say target priority? How are we going to focus on, how do we decide what is a priority for us? Well, in a boss fight, you lose this. In fact, in some ways, a boss fight becomes very easy, right? Because there's only one target. There's only one thing to do. There's no other consideration that you have to make. It's just kill this one thing and the fight is over. So that in some ways that can kind of almost, it can almost kind of make the experience a little lackluster. Michael asking what drawing software I am using. Yes, this is Microsoft Whiteboard, and I am using my Wacom Intuos Pro tablet. So this is what the boss fight concept is lacking. Related to this is action economy. Now, in most D20 or any sort of tactical based game, the fact is going to be that, it's going to be one turn versus many turns. And that alone is sort of a problem, because it makes, in my personal opinion, it makes the combat feel very, very, very non-dynamic. And this is kind of a combination of the above features. But when action economy is completely out of whack, and when you lack tactical depth, what ends up happening is you end up with a very static battlefield. You end up with an encounter that does not evolve. You end up with even a regular encounter, say, versus 3 or 4 monsters. We've talked about pacing and tension mechanics, and the fact that when you're killing monsters, the encounter is getting easier each time you kill a monster. But the fact of the matter is the encounter is at least changing. It is at least evolving. And when you're fighting against one monster and you have all of this action economy on your advantage, well, the monster's action economy is never going to change, because it's either going to have all of its actions or it's going to die. Or the party members are going to have an action economy advantage. That's not going to change throughout the entire combat. So you end up with this situation where
Matthew Keen tipped $100. I don't get to visit often, but it's a pleasure when I can. Cheers. Clinking beer mugs.
I am strong, strong, strong.
Matthew, thank you very, 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 very much. You just crushed out that Stream Elements tip goal. Appreciate that to unbelievable amount. The Stream Element tip goal, which we didn't even get to, by the way, is that we're gonna do a Rage of Elements review when the new book comes out. It comes out the 17th, I think. So we'll have to get official. I know we're getting a copy. We just have to make sure we okay it with Paizo when we can publish our review. We don't want to get in trouble like we did last time. So we are definitely going to go ahead and go forward with that. And thank you, Matthew, for that incredibly, incredibly gracious and amazing tip. I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. While we were doing that, we got another super chat from Vin, who says, I do not think target engagement priority is the underlying function. I think the underlying goal is the combat puzzle. Matthew says, keep on keeping on. I will, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Well, I think we're going to get to that. We're going to get to this idea of the combat puzzle, Vin, as sort of an idea. I'm just saying about, like, if you were to run, we'll use Pathfinder 2 as an example. In Pathfinder 2, if I were to just grab, a lot of people, including the adventure path writers of Pathfinder 2, say, okay, I've got 4 level 5 PCs. All right. So let's see. A level 8 monster is what? Is that 120 experience points? Okay. That's my boss. That's a severe boss. Like, I'm not trying to say that this is horrible and bad. But this is not a good encounter. And unfortunately, this is sort of what the math or the books or Pathfinder 2 would tell you. And there have been attempts to fix this. Fourth edition D&D, 13th Age, which is sort of an evolution of 4th edition, both sort of tried to fix this problem. But even they, I think, have some issues with how they kind of accomplished it. So we're going to get to the idea of like what makes this a problem and what we kind of need to sort of expose here. So what does it lack? Tactical depth, action economy, non-dynamic. Tying to non-dynamicism is this idea, and this is what we talked about a lot last time, is we talked about the idea of progression. And this is, by the way, where I ended up getting sort of, maybe I was wrong. And we'll get to this in a second here. When you're fighting this fight, okay, there is a sense as you burn down the brutes, or you break your way through the brutes and reach the artillery monsters in the back, there's a sense of evolution of gaining on the party, right? Or gaining on the encounter, that you are achieving milestones throughout the encounter. And I think that is a very important component. And it's one of the reasons why I really do not like the standard kind of adventure path encounter where you usually only have 1 or 2 monsters, because I think that those lack this concept of progression. Now, when we're talking about progression, most of the time we are talking about enemies dying, right? About taking out a monster. And we call that progression. Maybe you literally reduce them to 0 hit points, or you hit them with a calm emotion spell and they critically fail, or something that otherwise take slow 2 or something that they're slow 2. Something that really basically essentially takes them out of the equation. The issue with this, and again, I'm going to get a little deep into the weeds here. I'm going to use Pathfinder 2 as an example, but this is true for 4th edition as well. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, if I wanted this 4-person fight to be severe, then I need 120 XP. if I make each of these monsters party level -1 in level, so let's say we had level 5 PCs, so I'm going to use level 4 monsters, then they are worth 30 experience points each. And if we add all 4 of these monsters up, we can see that we have a 120 experience point severe encounter. But the party is going to probably very quick. It is entirely likely that, depending on initiatives and how they're rolled, that one of these monsters, assuming the party is more or less focusing on it, which is pretty standard, will be dead before it gets a second turn. It might, if it's lucky, it might get 2. But a lot of times, the party will go with some initiatives, they'll attack it, someone else will attack it, the monster will get a turn, and then the party members who went first in round 1 go first in round 2, and they end up killing the monster. And yes, the 4 monsters have done some damage to the party, but now this fight is down to 90 XP, which is, barely above a moderate, which is not really much of a challenge at all. And because of the way D20 works, our party members are still operating at full capacity. I mean, they're only down, even if they were down a lot of their hit points, which they probably wouldn't be, they're still functioning at 100% capacity. Until you're dead or at 0, you don't lose any of your efficacy in D20-based fantasy. This is true of 4th edition as it is of Pathfinder 2nd edition. This means that the most exciting and dangerous round of combat is the first one, right? Is the second, maybe the first and second round, because now it's 4v3 and it's only a moderate encounter. So we're very quickly, now that this guy's down, we very quickly kill this guy. And now we're down to a 60 XP encounter, which is low difficulty, which is basically not even worth your time. And it is fairly likely that the PCs, there were 4 of them. Okay, there were 4 PCs. In most situations in this encounter, the PCs are probably still at 4 PCs. Okay, they didn't lose any party members. And so, it's not like you traded, like if the party, if you take out 2 of these monsters and you're down to a 3 party members, and that changes, or 2, that changes the math considerably. But that is a very rare kind of occurrence. In fact, ironically, the only time that you really kind of see that happen, which is to say party members getting taken out, is if I were to throw a really tough fight at the party, say an extreme fight in Pathfinder 2nd edition, a 160 XP fight. And now we have our 4 PCs, and they're fighting this 160 XP fight, and it's already extreme, or maybe it's only 140, which is still very tough. But that's a much tougher fight, which means it's more likely actually that one of our PCs will go down. But now we have the opposite problem, because now this encounter is unwinnable, and the PCs are basically either forced to flee or they're going to wipe because they can't overcome, the math of the situation. So again, I'm going to get to sort of my first revelation. So progression to me is very important. And so at last year, when we talked about boss battles, I wanted to take inspiration from the Dungeons and Dragons minis game, okay, which came out with a series of models that they called their Icons series. And these were basically just big ass dragons. All right. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Dungeons and Dragons minis game was basically a skirmish level game. It used the combat rules from 3rd edition D&D, but it was not a role-playing game. Your opponent and you played a competitive game where you built a war band, which was between 3 to 12 models, versus your opponent's war band, which was between 3 to 12 models. And this was like, like Magic the Gathering, where you would assemble your war band before Warhammer, where you would assemble your Warhammer or, your skirmish band before you came to the match or before you came to the tournament. And you would agree, you'd play to a certain number of points, right? Hey!
Matt W tipped $25. Love your content. Viva 4th edition.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the $25 tip and really appreciate the love for 4th edition. It is a beloved edition of mine, and I really love a lot of the game elements that they did there. Thank you very much for that, Matt. We do need to figure out a way to get like some 4E play on this channel. I don't know how we can do it, but I want to show people what it's capable of. It's not the best game, but it is very good at what it does. Janka says, I like multi-creature fights, but there could be boring cleanup rounds after the fight is basically over, unless the enemies are made to flee or die for some ad hoc reason after the real threat dies. Janka, this is a great, I mean, not to get sidetracked, Janka, but this is a great example of where old D&D had it right. Where old D&D had it right was they knew that, if you had 4 party members and you were fighting 16 kobolds, that was scary. And that was a real fight where those 16 kobolds are very weak individually. They could burn down your party members pretty quick. And so, you have 2 rounds or maybe 3 rounds of fighting. Okay. And when the smoke clears, the party members have mostly triumphed, right? They have 4 PCs they still have their 4 PCs. But now, there's only 11 kobolds. So, I mean, this was, the PCs were likely to win this encounter, but there was a chance, there was a danger here. This encounter, the party is going to win no matter what. But original D&D said, guess what? The scariness, the tension of this fight is gone. So let's have a morale check, and the kobolds will just run away. And why even stay around and just, as you put it, the cleanup phase? It's just not worth it. It's not really exciting. It's just, pointless slaughter. And so, original D&D did kind of fix this with the morale rules. And that way it's like, you don't have this weird, you just let them kill everybody. And there's also this cool concept of the enemies fleeing and regrouping and maybe coming back in greater numbers, so that there's a sense of not just combat progression, right? But sort of adventure session progression. It kind of makes things be approached very differently. To be clear, it makes things get approached in a very different way. That's more of Metal Gear Solid Snake, Stealth Commandos, rather than sort of the kick in the door, big damn heroes, action hero story that we kind of tend to lean towards today. So that's why it's kind of a little bit different. Yeah, morale rules in D&D were lifted straight from morale rules in, war games. And historically, if you look at real historical battles, which is where, D&D came from, it came from those war games, which we're trying to emulate. I mean, casualty rates of 100% were unheard of. I mean, the number of times that, in history where a unit has literally been wiped out to a man are shockingly rare. In some instances, in most instances, like Alexander the Great, Roman Empire stuff, units typically broke after losing 5-10% casualties, right? It doesn't take a lot of watching your friends die to decide you'd rather be somewhere else, right? Especially too in D&D, where most of the time these monsters are, quote, evil, right? They're not heroic individuals who stand triumphantly in cause of what they believe in. No, they're cravenly, cowardly creatures, right? They should be running away. Anyways, I knew we were going to get a little sidetracked here. But anyways, my point is, Janka, that they did kind of solve that issue. But thank you for the super chat. SC Voldo, my buddy Rich, says, I remember your first tournament at Gen Con in minis. Yeah, I mean, me and Tim from the channel loved D&D minis. We used to play it a lot. We used to go to Gen Con and enter tournaments. It was a lot of fun. So sidetracked on a KLLC stream, it could never happen. I agree though that old D&D does not match with modern gaming expectations. 100%. I'm not trying to say that that's a classic shift. In fact, the biggest problem is, okay. So this is such a tangent and I don't want to go down it, but self-confessed cynic is making me do this. Okay. Here's the problem that a lot of people have. Okay. And I'm going to try to go through this very quickly, right? In old, what we'll call OSR D&D, right? So AD&D first edition, AD&D second edition. You got, I would say, less than 10% of your XP from monsters. Okay. So in other words, killing monsters did not get you a lot of experience points. Okay. 90% of your XP came from treasure. And that meant that like the single greatest thing that you could do would be to find unguarded treasure. If you could sneak or break in or cast a stone-shaped spell or pass wall spell and open up the wall behind the treasure, but without having to fight any of the monsters, you would get all of the benefit, or nearly all of the benefit, without losing very much at all. And most importantly, you died at 0 hit points in original D&D. So if we go back to our example, right, of the 4 PCs versus the 16 kobolds, yeah, sure, the party members are likely to win, but you know what? Something could go wrong really quick, and every hit point counted. You weren't going to be able to treat wounds to full as soon as the fight ended. And so when you got down to 4 PCs versus, say, 11 kobolds, and they ran away, you were excited because you weren't going to gain any experience points from these little shits anyways. And all they were doing, if you had to grind and clean them up, yeah, you were going to win. No one's doubting that. But it was going to take you 2 or 3 rounds of combat, and you were going to probably get hit at least a few more times, and like unnecessarily so, because you weren't getting shit from it. So when the enemy ran away, and that meant you didn't have to bother fighting them anymore, which meant you didn't have to risk losing any more hit points, then boom, that was a huge win. So seeing the enemy run away was viewed in that era as being a good thing. But this concept of XP for treasure really got lost, I think, both because of video games, because it was kind of difficult to do, and also because of the way that RPGs changed. I should say TTRPGs changed the way that experience points were awarded. By the time you get to 3rd edition D&D, if you fought a monster, whether it was a random encounter or not, right, it was a CR3. And a lot of GMs, were like, well, if the monster doesn't die, then you don't get the experience points. And so now a monster running away, or like in a video game, like if you're playing EverQuest, right, or World of Warcraft, if the monster gets to low hit points and starts running away, you don't get shit. That monster's got to die for you to get the experience points. And so you chase the monster down. Okay. And so we got used to this idea that the monster has to die. If the monster's getting away, that's a problem. That's going to be a bad, that's going to be a bad deal for us. We're not going to get the treasure. We're not going to get the gold. We're not going to get the experience points. And so we have to track them down. And so the modern sensibility has changed, so that now, you're murder hobos. I mean, I know there's like a sort of a stigma attached to the original school, old school players of being murder hobos. And, to be clear, people were, but at the same time, actually, it's actually the modern day adventurer who's much more of a murder hobo. So that's kind of where I was kind of trying to go with this, because basically, yes, like the modern sensibility is kill all the monsters because that's how we feel like we won. Right. And in my experience playing over the last 20 years, especially with newer players, if monsters run away, players feel like, shit, this is horrible for us. We didn't get anything. We lost something. This is only going to be bad for us. This is only going to be bad for us. Whereas, if you were, fighting in, in any sort of war conflict, if the enemy started running away, you would be psyched. You won the day. You won the battle, right? And you weren't going to have to fight anymore. So like that was a huge, kind of shift in the way that people, experience the game. All right. It's hard to keep up with chat on whiteboard days. Luke says, I want to experiment with a simple idea for the cleanup part of combat in second edition. Simply let the fight end in a narrative way, or give us, you're using some rolls. If the table agrees, give us more time. Yeah, I think that's okay, as long as everybody's on board with it. Morale is kind of, I think your best bet to go from that. Yeah, I mean, we still use morale in Warhammer. Lots of other war games still use morale rules. Yes, that is very true. Nothing gets to flee. Everything is killed. Everybody's a war criminal. I would definitely agree with that. Yes. And also too, I mean, that's quite right. Pathfinder rewards you for the encounter regardless. You know, if they flee or die, like it shouldn't matter to you. You should get 10 works worth of experience. Not to mention, a lot of GMs are using, you know, milestone-based experience. And so if you're using milestone-based experience, it doesn't even matter if the monsters die or not, because you're just going to level up when you get to the next part of the adventure anyway. So it doesn't really even matter. But it's kind of, you know, ingrained into people's mindsets. Oh yes, I mean, Michael, we've joked for years, right, that you're literally siphoning it out of people. There was an old PlayStation game called Onimusha where when monsters died, you literally like sucked their souls into your gauntlet, which was the experience points. And you know, we joke that that's what you're doing in D&D as well. Well, I mean, to me, this is where it's like I almost wish monsters were worth no experience points, right? Because unless your goal is legitimately like, I don't know, killing all of the monsters, then it shouldn't matter what monsters you fight or they flee. It shouldn't matter. I almost would rather, you know, get rid of it entirely. All right. A lot of chats today. Sorry. Not that I mean to skip everybody here, but so what I was going to say is in Dungeons and Dragons minis, you had 3 to 12 models versus their 3 to 12 models. Well, each model got to go each side got to activate 2 models. Then the next side got to activate 2 models. Then you got to activate 2 models. Then your opponent got to activate 2 models. And you got to activate 2 models, and so on and so forth. And when they came out with these big ass dragons, it was just one dragon versus somebody's entire war band of 3 to 12 models. And the way that they dealt with this is they gave the dragon like 800 hit points. And they said for each 100 hit points that the dragon has, okay, it gets 1 activation. So essentially at full hit points, or up until it got down to 700 hit points, the dragon would get to activate 8 times in a round. So in other words, you know, my dragon would go twice, then my enemy would go twice. Then my dragon would go twice. Then my enemy would go twice, and so on and so forth. And as the party was attacking the dragon, you know, with their 3 to 12 models, probably 8 to 10 models is more likely, they would be doing damage to this dragon. And eventually, you know, now it's down to 650 hit points. Okay, so now it only has 7 activations. Oh, they dropped it to 600 HP. Now it is down to 6. And so this was the idea that I had for boss battles, because now you have this sense of progression. And I did something very similar to this even in the Nualia fight, where I gave Nualia 2 initiatives in the initiative battlefield. And when she got to 50% of her hit points, okay, 4th edition would call this bloodied, she basically lost one of her initiatives and became 1 initiative. It was a sense of progression. Here's the problem that I realized, though. You see, when you were fighting, this situation here sounds good in principle, but this is where Derek was wrong. But you got to remember our experience over here with the PCs and the action economy. You see, when we're playing this skirmish D&D minis game, okay, my dragon might start off with 800 hit points and thus 8 activations, right? So it has 8. And I'm fighting my opponent who has 10 miniatures, 10 separate models. So my opponent, she has 10 activations, right? But my dragon has 8. Now, as my dragon starts to lose hit points, it's going to go down to 7 and 6 and 5. And I thought, oh, that is such a cool progression. But then I realized it's because in that game, where these aren't people's characters, these are just, you know, soldiers in a combat miniature game, my opponent, my dragon is wiping these people out as well, right? My dragon is taking minis off the board. And so as my dragon loses activations, my opponent is losing activations as well. And so the tension kind of stays ratcheted up, because sure, the party gets that feeling of progression, but because the monster is definitely getting weaker, but they're getting weaker too. And that was my biggest mistake with boss fights. It is realizing that the PCs don't get weaker. If you're playing a standard boss fight where you have 4 PCs, they probably, almost certainly, start with 4 PCs at the first round, they're at 4 PCs by the final round, and they're at 4 PCs by the last round. The number of times that a party member actually gets taken out in a conflict is shockingly rare. And actually, it's worse than that, because in the event that the party member does get taken out, then the party's likely going to die. They're likely going to get wiped out because the fight is too difficult for them. So it's almost like you need to have the party members survive. So what that means is that my advice essentially was wrong, because having the monster decay, while it does solve the progression issue, okay, and arguably maybe even gives it a little bit more dynamicism, it does not do anything about the tactical depth, and most importantly, it actually exacerbates the action economy issue. Because what ends up happening is the party members start with 4 actions as a group, and they end with 4 actions as a group. Whereas your monster is going to start strong and end weak, which means we have failed. It means that the first round of combat, or maybe the first 2 rounds of the combat, are the most exciting rounds of the fight. So we cannot do that. Cybersmith with a £5 super chat says, I'll have to watch this on the VOD. Currently running troop rules in the play-by-post. Do you think troops make for good bosses, or indeed minions for them? I don't really like the troop rules in general, but do I think that they would make a better boss than a standard monster? I think actually, and if you're using standard Pathfinder 2 rules, it probably does make a better boss than the standard monster would. Vin with $2 says, yes, you were wrong. The cycle of Vin continues. Now, Roxley says, couldn't you say that casters do get weaker if they are mainly using their highest level spells? Yes, that is true, Roxley. However, that being the case, most spellcasters have a good number of their highest level spell slots. And even if you look at the balance, Heizo really doesn't just consider their highest level spell slots. They consider the 2 highest level spell slots as sort of being your active spells, as being kind of the important ones. And you have scrolls, and you have, abilities to get spells back. And it's like, you just have so much firepower, Roxley, that I really do not view the party as getting weaker as the fight goes on. Yes, they might, even if you, quote, run out of focus points, most focus spells aren't really all that impressive or powerful anyways, because they're repeatable. So it's not like you're really losing all that much, punch out of what you're doing. And so what ends up happening is my methodology that I espoused in that last video just doesn't really work that well. Now, Gossamer with her member chat for being a 1-month member. Gossamer says, what about the opposite? Like many video games where when a boss gets weaker, they access their huge limit break power that unleashes devastation. Gossamer, let's see here. Whipplestein said something similar. 2 heads, lose a head, but rage and double damage at 50%. This is not a bad idea, but the problem with it is, and this is kind of getting where I'm getting to, is that it feels like the party. How can I say this? And I'm just thinking about this as being like a person who's playing these games. As a player, what I feel when we, get the enemy down, and then it gets stronger, it ends up feeling kind of like a little disappointing, because you're like, I want to add progression to this. I want to feel like I'm winning, but all I've managed to do is make the boss stronger. And so now I'm sort of, in a worse spot than I was before. I know it seems kind of silly and counterproductive because you're like, well, you have to kill it to kill it. But it can feel very strange as a player to sort of feel like I just made the enemy stronger by sort of beating it and doing damage to it. Yes, not stronger, angrier. And in the boss summary last year, the community picked this issue up immediately. Gossamer, we had multiple solutions to this, and yeah, that's on the list. So what I would say for me, I actually, and this is, I mean, we're kind of getting into it a little bit, but this is for me where the idea, or rather the issue of a timer comes in. Okay. Now I'm going to hop over to Triune. So now obviously Triune was a bit of an exception to the standard, encounters. Triune was a 3-headed god, controlled by me, Aaron, and Bob. You can see that, the central head aspect of power had 2,000 hit points. The aspect of death, 1,000, and the aspect of domination, 1,000. But as an example to this, this fight had a series of, if you will, phases. Okay. And what ended up happening here, where is it? Okay, here we go. And this is sort of an example. And now it ends. So when a second aspect of Triune is defeated, the fight moves into phase 3. What ends up happening here is an aura extended out from the monster, from the boss. Okay. And at the start of each of its turns, that aura would constrict by 20 feet. And if a PC ended their turn outside of the aura, they died. So what this essentially was a timer. Okay. And what this meant is that I felt like I got better mileage. Now it didn't matter because the Triune had a different problem, which was that the party was really, 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 really broken. But what I have found is that, yeah, the battle turned into Fortnite. Yes. I mean, that was 100% that was definitely the inspiration for that. But rather than the boss getting stronger at certain HP thresholds, I like the idea of the boss becoming stronger at various rounds or in timed positions, because that way the party can both plan around it. They know that it's going to happen. And, if let's say you have it planned that, there's a fight, and at round 3, the boss is going to get a lot stronger, and the party knows that. So if the party does really good and they kick ass and they end up killing the monster or the boss on round 4, then they only had to deal with it being super powerful for 1 round. And so that'll feel like a victory. But if it ends up taking them a long time and they're not able to put, together a winning package, and they have to take all the way to round 6, then maybe that increased strength of the boss is enough to, cause a TPK or otherwise cause, sort of a loss. But even better than this, is going back to the idea of the action economy, because this is a fine idea. Okay. But what's better than this is, again, thinking about tactical depth. And I think I see some stuff in chat, which is already sort of getting at it. And this is sort of basic, boss, kind of boss thought process 101. But what's even a better idea is coming up with a list of secondary and potentially even tertiary objectives for the parties to go and deal with. Someone says, disrupt the ritual or the boss gets more yoked, and that is exactly kind of the idea here, where you could have a situation where, there are, there are 4 gems. Okay. And and you let the party know, at the start of turn 4 or the start of turn 3, the boss will heal 25% HP for each undestroyed gem. Okay. So if you fight the boss and you don't destroy any gems, then when you get to round 4, it heals for 100% of its life. Right now, it might still be to the party's advantage to not necessarily destroy them all. But the point is, they are now getting to make decisions. And more importantly, if you have a big room and, your boss is here in the middle doing boss shit, and you've got your little gems over here in the corners, okay, then what you're causing is the party now has to run around. They have to do things. Their movement matters. They have to use their skills, spells, and abilities in order to sort of deal with all of the challenges which are sort of erupting around them.
Blood Ernest tipped $10, bossing the stream, as always.
Thank you, Blood Ernest. Appreciate that. Yeah, we're trying to boss this up. So yeah, I think that having, because again, well, I see something here. Vin says, for me, the party knowing what kind of boss they're facing is actually something I avoid. E.g., you shouldn't know what the next phase will look like. But I fundamentally disagree with Derek on this. Here's the problem that I have with this. Okay, this isn't like a video game. If you have, and this is assuming you have a small group, if you have 4 PCs, they're going to take between 3 to 5 minutes for their turn. And, you got a DM or GM, and they might take a little bit longer, maybe potentially because they have a complicated turn or whatever. Long story short, you're looking at something like 20 to, 30 minutes per round of combat. So unless you are prepared to spend 3-4 hours in this fight, then you're only going to reasonably be able to get 3 to 4 rounds of combat. And I personally feel like when people talk about like phases and the boss, like, and having no idea, like, oh, we're learning what the boss does, and then, oh, it changes when it turns into a phase. It's like, how long was that phase even around for? 1 round, right? Like 2 rounds, maybe at most. And it's not even about the mystery, Vin. It's about the fact that I just feel like the sort of phase progression in TTRPGs isn't really a winning strategy, because you do not get enough. You just do not get enough turns. You do not get enough, action. And what I hate to say it, but it's like the cooler thing. Well, my proper boss fights have gone on for 3 to 6 hours. Oh, I mean, okay, that's, I guess. If you're willing to do that, okay, awesome. If you're going to have a 6-hour boss fight, then you can end up with something like, 18 rounds of combat. And, then, yeah, you can have, phase 1 is 6 rounds, and phase 2 is 6 rounds, and then phase 3, and then phase 3 is 6 rounds. And it's like, okay, that's really cool. But that's just not the way that most people are even going to be able to do that, and don't get me wrong, there's like a lot of advantages to this. I don't fundamentally disagree with the idea of phases. It's that, because I do think what that does, 12 to 18 rounds. God bless your players, I guess. It's less about, confusion as it is about because the thing I like about phases is it does change the dynamics of the fight. So let me give you an example of 4E. This was actually the Northern Reaches campaign. This was the original Northern Reaches campaign, 15 years ago that we played. And I had it was like a hex crawl, sort of strategic battle, where you had a campaign, it had politics. Anyways, there was a big dragon, red dragon named Flame. He had like a cool dragon name. Like it was like, Pyrixius or something like that. But he was known as, like the Flame of the North was what he was known as, or Flame. And he was this big boss dragon that kind of, chilled on his dragon mountain in the middle of the map and, did his own thing. So the party ended up eventually encountering him and fighting him. And the way that I had this creature sort of play out was I literally had 3 different monsters. Okay. Now they were all solos. Okay. Or they might have been elites, but either way, they were monsters that were designed to be, fighting multiple creatures. And the first monster was a skirmisher, using 4th edition's terminology. That meant it moved a lot. It was fast. It sort of, struck and moved. Then when they killed that monster, they didn't really kill a monster. Then what ended up happening is they killed it, but in the narration, right, the monster kind of got flung down. There was sort of like a cut scene like you would see in a boss fight. The dragon screamed, it flung its wings out, lava burst out all over the battlefield, and the creature then took into the air. And in the second phase of the fight, the creature actually became an artillery monster, and it flew around and it spit fireballs down at the people. And the ground became all sort of full of lava and sort of all these hazards, and people had to joke around. And then eventually they killed that. And then, when they kill that, the creature kind of, plummets to the ground and then gets up and kind of unleashes this bestial roar. And then for the final countdown, it was a brute. There was no subtlety, no tactics. It was just trying to do mass damage as much as it can. And so what ends up happening in that fight, at least, was that the fight really did feel different, because these monsters literally were different monsters. They had different stats. They had different saves. They had different armor classes. They had different hit point totals. I mean, fundamentally, it was like the party fought one monster, it died, and another one immediately took its place, it died, and then a third one took its place, and then when it died, they won. But of course, in the fiction, in the narrative, this was all the same monster going through a series of phases. Now, was that effective? Was that cool? Yes, but for one main reason, which I think it's easy to miss. You see, remember, I believe in player agency, and that means that I think that people should have a good idea of how to handle your threat. If there is a monster that has, weakness to something and has extreme resistance to a bunch of other damage types, and the party members don't know that, and then the monster is difficult because the party's just throwing their head against it because they can't figure out what the thing is weak to, I don't really consider that to be very entertaining or very engaging. But as when the party has an idea of, okay, what is this creature capable of doing? What kind of resistances and weaknesses does it have? Let us plan our actions differently. Let us plan our resources differently. So having a sort of sense, in Pathfinder 2nd edition, we all know what resistance means. We all know what vulnerability means. And so when we hear those words, we can think and we can plan differently. Because I was playing 4th edition, my players knew what skirmisher meant. And they knew what artillery meant, and they knew what brute meant. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they knew every single one of this creature's abilities. But because those roles carried with them mechanical weight, it was enough for me to say, it's a skirmisher, it's artillery, it's a brute. Because that alone kind of put them into the right mindset of, oh, we've dealt with artillery type monsters before. This one's going to, of course, have its own unique things. But when I told them it was an artillery monster and flying around, when it started spitting fireballs at them from a range distance, they were like, this makes sense because it's artillery. They already knew what to expect out of that monster. And so I got good mileage sort of out of the resonant effect of 4th edition D&D by relying on these monster rolls, because I was able to communicate to the party very, very quickly what this monster generally is going to be able to do without having actually, number one, literally sit there and tell them, okay, here's what my monster can do. Here's what my monster can do. Here's what my monster can do, which I agree is, it's not only boring, but, in the sense that at the session, it can be very, very draining, but it's also, kind of robs you of some of the fun of exploring what a monster could do. But also, it's not just being like, have fun figuring it out. I hope you guys don't die while you're running around looking like idiots trying to figure out what this thing's secret gimmick is. I think the mystery element of that is somewhat overstated. So yeah, so I don't mind the idea of phases per se, but you need a way to communicate to your party members a meaningful sense of what these creatures can do. Because part of the fun of fighting a monster is that sense of mastery, right? Of the sense of learning how this creature operates and then sort of being able to take advantage of that knowledge to your advantage. If doing a kind of limited boss fight designed for 3 to 6 rounds, I agree that both phases and discoverable mechanics, frankly, aren't practical. And I think that is an interesting question. I'm going to ask, this is a poll, chat poll. All right, so we got a poll up asking, when you do have what we would call a boss fight, how long are your boss fights typically? Do you find that they play out pretty much the same as your normal fights, or do they take longer? And if they take longer, do they take considerably longer? And is a boss fight taking longer necessarily necessary for the boss fight to be satisfying? Jonka says, but Derek, players taking forever to figure it out as part of the simulation, and my story. Yeah, no, listen, I think there's a time and a place for learning, and again, for learning mechanics, but I cannot help but reiterate something to you. Most people, including people from this Discord, are taking their boss mechanics from MMOs and video games, both of which have the idea that you go in and you fight the raid boss or you fight the big boss at the end of the dungeon and you wipe and it's no big deal. You just respawn, you lost a couple hours of your time and you learn something and you do it again. Or you're playing a video game, you fight the boss, you die, you reload at your last checkpoint and you fight the boss again. The video game developers know that part of the fun of that mastery, of that progression, is doing it 3 or 4 times and learning a little more each time, and then feeling that sense of mastery when the party finally puts it all together and realizes, okay, in the first part of it, I got to make sure that I don't stand still because then the fire blast will get me. In the second stage, I got to make sure that I'm using my shield because he's going to come at me with these big, powerful damage attacks. And then when I get to the third phase, I got to go all out because if I don't kill him in 30 seconds, he's going to go max damage and rage timer and he's going to kill me and burn me down. There's nothing I can do about it. So that's my plan, which I have constructed over a series of losses. And now when I finally execute it, it feels really good. And there's, YouTube is replete with people screaming and cheering on their TeamSpeak and Ventrilo back in the day on their World of Warcraft servers when they finally kill a boss because it was like this big deal. We don't have that in TTRPGs. You get one shot. That's it. Most of the time you get one shot to fight something, to do, to interact with something or to do something. Unless you're using some very generous, which are typically not rules as written, retreating rules, and even then, that's still going to be a pretty rough kind of session where it's like you fight a boss for 2 or 3 hours, realize that you're, getting your ass beat. And then it's like, well, then you run away and it's like, I guess we come back next week and we do it again. Maybe that works for some people, but I think a lot of people would have a problem with that. All right. I'm going to end the poll here. And the results are 60% of you said 5 to 7 rounds. 27% said 3 to 4. And only 7% said 8 to 12, 5% said 13 or more. So more or less, everybody is taking probably what I would consider to be a little longer than a standard combat. I think most combats are going to run between 3 to 5 rounds. In D20, 4th edition, 13th Age, Pathfinder 2. So 5 to 7 is definitely longer than a typical combat. Matt says, I think for that, a simple 2-stage idea can work, and discoverability might be a reward for earlier actions to stuff that information. Well, I mean, again, I am a big fan of not necessarily just literally giving this to people, but having it be part of it. I mean, I think, being part of the game where the players discover what this thing can do, and they can use that information to their advantage. I mean, in theory, wizards are supposed to be balanced, clerics are supposed to be balanced against sorcerers because they can prepare their spells differently, and they might take different spells depending on what the situation is going to be or what they're going to be fighting. Deepre says something doesn't feel right about a boss fight that only lasts 18 seconds. I mean, that's a whole other set of issues, right? Like, even if you have your 5-round, your 7-round boss fight, like that's 30 seconds in game. It's so weird to think of it like that. It's over so quickly. It almost just doesn't feel right. It doesn't really feel great. Rockley says, I feel like boss fights are usually shorter because the players go Nova. I mean, that is true. Let's see here. People talking about Dark Souls, MMOs, a dream sequence fight. Now, Matthew, this is something that I actually do strongly believe in. I love the idea of, and again, this probably takes a lot more work, but you might have a mechanic that your boss uses. Maybe it's some sort of ice dungeon, and they have this this aura of frost ability that your boss monster has. Okay, but what you do is several encounters before the boss, or maybe even in multiple encounters before the boss, on just, what we would call, trash monsters, you introduce this aura of frost so that by the time they get to the boss monster and it has the aura of frost, this is a known quantity. It's still a challenge, but hopefully by now they've encountered it a few times. This, number one, should not be a surprise. And number two, they hopefully have come up with a sort of a reasonable tactic or strategy to sort of work around the problem that aura of frost generates. So I think that is, I did something like that in Northern Reaches Season 1, where I sort of tried to introduce boss mechanics to the group in the encounters before they got to the boss mechanics. So that way it wouldn't come off as a complete surprise. I do want to talk about a couple of things, though, specific to bosses. And in this instance, this is actually kind of specific. I'm going to talk about Pathfinder 2 here, but I just kind of want to get off on a tangent here. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not. So I'm going to let you all decide. I think that top-down design of a boss in Pathfinder 2 specifically, but maybe even in, 4th edition or whatever, D20, I think this is a bad idea. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there's a lot of ways to think of top down and bottom up. What I mean is a lot of people, even Bob recently, we're supposed to be working on a new boss monster for Northern Reaches Season 2. And he was like, so what are we thinking? PL, when I say PL, I mean like party level. PL +2, PL +3, stats, or whatever. I don't think you can think about bosses like that. Okay? I think you need to think about them differently, okay? I think you need to think of them bottom up. All right. Vin says, something that came up in chat, boss versus mini boss. Okay. I must have missed that here. I guess is the question, like, how do we define a boss versus a mini boss? I don't know. Although I do like this, by the way, I do like this by St. Valentine. Pathfinder fights aren't a chess match. They're basically running a football play. Each player is going to get to make 2 to 4 moves to reach a result. That is very accurate, St. Valentine. And I mean, that is what you definitely need to work around. Then what are we trying to say here? Okay. Bosses might go longer than mini bosses. I mean, okay. If we're talking about like the penultimate fight of a campaign, then, yes, I think that is fine to be accepted. Maybe of an adventure, but even then, I mean, that is asking a lot. But you know what? We can talk about this. Actually, we can get into this right now. I think that a better way to design bosses is to have an expectation of what you want this creature to do in your game. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, and I'm going to make some very broad generalities here, and I've done some of this math, so I'm not just pulling these numbers out of my ass, but they might not be 100% exactly correct. Let us say that I've got a party, okay, of 5 PCs, and I want to have a boss fight with them. And I say, okay, well, I know that with 5 PCs, it's going to take me about 20 minutes per combat round to get around the table, including me as the game master. I want to set aside 3 hours for this combat. So that means I'm going to be able to get in 9 rounds. Now, if we finish a little earlier, that's okay. If we go maybe 10 rounds, it's not bad, but we're going to be aiming for 8 to 9 rounds. Okay. I've got 5 PCs. They're level 5. I know that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, again, using Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that, if you include some, and I'm going to talk about a number here I'm going to include a number here in a second, but we'll talk about this. I know that on average, that a PC does about 15 points of damage per round. That's including their accuracy and the fact that maybe they're making the occasional map attack. So that means that as a group, and also, by the way, that's averaging out the fact that some PCs don't really do a lot of damage. Maybe they're more healers, but some do a lot more and kind of make up for that. So I know that this monster is going to take roughly 75 hit points of damage per round. If I want this monster to last 8 to 9 rounds, then I need to give this monster 9 times 75 hit points. I need to give this monster 675 hit points, because hit points are a timer. They're your timer. They are the way that this monster is sort of being set to tell you how long it's going to take. It is the sense of progression that the PCs would get. I think in this instance, by the way, I think telling the PCs the HP and having them track it for you is a really good idea, because they can definitely get a sense for this. Now, to go off of something, again, this is where, again, getting to the PL +1, I'm specifically talking here from Pathfinder 2nd Edition. When you're trying to calculate things like its AC, okay, or its fort saves or whatever, its DCs, what I think you need to think of is not what should its AC be. I think you need to think of what number on a D20 roll do I want people to have to roll. See you later, Whipplestein. Thank you so much again for the support. Thank you for being a legend, and look forward to talking to you soon, my friend. Enjoy the VOD later. I'm not going to lie to you. I have a special number. Now, Strategy from our Patreon has done the math and basically has more or less determined that for, an average monster in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a typical PC will hit it on an 8 or higher on a D20, which is kind of a cool number. So what I love for D20 for Pathfinder 2nd Edition is I love a boss that can be hit on an 11 or higher. Now, that's a 50% straight up. Okay, 50% hit chance. Why do I love this number? Now, because again, Pathfinder 2 teaches us to give the creature high armor class, but that is, I think, a horrible idea. And I'll get into why that is a horrible idea here in a second. But I really love the 11 to hit in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And I'll tell you why. It's because with an 11 to hit, your, barbarians, your rangers, your monks, whoever, everybody, has a 50% chance of hitting. Specifically, actually, they have a 45% chance of hitting. And they crit exactly only on a 20. okay, which means that they have a 5% chance of critting. So they have a 45% chance of hitting, and they have a 5% chance of critting. But if the party can improve their accuracy by 2 points, let's say a flank, let's say a spell, okay, then just by flanking, okay, this is a total of a 50% chance to hit or crit. Now they have a 60% chance to hit or crit. Okay. Oh, what happened? My whiteboard. No, my whiteboard. Okay, we lost my whiteboard there for a second. Strange things are afoot. Okay. On a 60% chance, they have a 50% chance to hit, and now they crit on a 19 or 20, which means they have a 10% chance to crit, which means that by doing something in the game, flanking, casting a buff spell, they have doubled their chances of critically hitting. They've doubled them. They went from 5% to 10%. That's a double. By the way, this stat line is what a fighter starts against the boss with. And I saw somebody in chat say it, and they were correct. Michael, you are very correct. When you have a boss that starts off, let's say, with a really high AC, where people in the party need a 17 or a 16 in order to hit it, well, that means they're only hitting it 20% of the time. But a fighter is hitting it 30% of the time because they have a 2-point better, higher accuracy. But that means that the fighter is hitting 50% more often than the other people in the party. That is a huge number. Also, it is very horrible and boring to need this high of a value to hit. It's just horrible. Okay? Now, Awesome, you are absolutely right. I am specifically talking here about a level 5 party member. Okay? So, just trust me on this. But if you have a 50% accuracy, then your DPR is like 15. If you go to this level of accuracy, your DPR becomes like 19. All right. Now, at 15, we're doing 75. It takes this party 9 rounds to bring down our monster. But if everybody can work together and they can do their stuff, and they can, fight the monster and do all that and maintain that, this party, which is operating slightly better, can bring the monster down in 7 rounds. And that means that you now have sort of a gap where you can sort of play with the expectation of how this monster is going to perform and how this monster is going to progress. Because if you make the monster become really dangerous, say in round 6, then the party that is doing a good job is going to be nearing killing it. And it's only going to have 1 more round worth of, maybe 2 more rounds worth of damage. Whereas the party that has been performing badly is going to have to deal with several more rounds of combat. And that potentially could be what, ends them. I should also note that at list level 5, it is possible, because of spells like Heroism or Inspire Courage, Frighten on the enemy, you could end up with a 4-point delta, in which case you now have a 70% chance of hitting, and you could probably take the monster out in 5 rounds. So to me, maybe round 4 and round 6 become the break points of where I would want to do something in this combat to sort of show the party what is happening.
Claude Corp tip $3. Love those stats.
Thank you, Claude. Yes. Now, someone asked, thank you for the tip, Claude. Yeah, Jonka asked, is there a chart somewhere of the average damage per player per level? No. This is just where, unfortunately, maybe we can come up with one. We can work with one on the Patreon. But this is sort of me just being experienced and knowing the game and understanding striking runes and accuracies and, benefits that some of the damage dealing classes get in order to increase their accuracy, which increases their damage, or a barbarian increasing their damage. I mean, there is a range, and it's never going to be 100% accurate, because the other thing, which I want to bring up, is when you target a lower armor class for your boss, you reduce variance. I think we've all been here before, where on paper, a PL +3 or a PL +4 boss monster, it's like, oh, okay, this creature is really tough. It has a really high accuracy. It hits my PC on a 3 or higher. What this means is that I crit on a 13 or higher, and then my second attack is 8 or higher, which means I crit on an 18 or higher. And because this creature's higher level than me, not only can it hit me more often, its damage is going to be higher. And that means that there's a very real chance that because of swinginess, because of variability, my PC could just be unconscious in the first round of combat. I do not like this idea. I think this is not only is this not fun for the party member, but also it just throws the entire balance of the game completely out of whack. Now, I'm not trying to say that 4th edition got it right, because 4th edition is it made its boss monsters the same level as every other monster. They didn't get better accuracy. They didn't get better attacks. What they got was more hit points. They got the ability to sort of take multiple actions in a turn. They got the ability to potentially deal with debilitating or problematic statuses like paralyze, stun. And they got abilities that enabled them to attack and deal with multiple people at once. And this is something else that I've kind of have learned, which is you cannot use strikes in your boss battles. You just can't. If you're going to use a strike in your boss battle, it has to be something like, when I made Triune for Bob, I think I clicked on the same one. Yeah, I did. Bob, who was the aspect of power, had this map attack for a single action, which had the open trait, RIP, open trait. Flailing around with no thought for strategy or precision, the aspect of power unleashes its might and power. Number 1, increase your map by -5. So the creature started off by increasing its multiple attack penalty by +5. And then make a strike against all foes within your reach. And then increase map by -5. And this is for one action. But what this basically meant is that the creature, which was more powerful, could essentially attack everybody. It could at least attack 3 or 4 or 5 people. Whoever's in melee with it. It had a really long reach. It was a really big monster. And it wasn't as, it wasn't as accurate as a single attack, but this was by far a better solution. Janka says $5. The math of PF2 checks out, but aimbot monsters that are hard to hit and makes all the saves anyways does feel like a boring way to do boxes. Yes, and I think, Janka, this is an important point. The math of Pathfinder 2 is tight. Those bosses do work, but I don't think they're fun. And I do think that they are very swingy. I think they're very, very swingy. And I think that on both ways, I think that the bosses that exist in Pathfinder 2 can both get burned down really quickly. And I also think that it's very easy for them to have a good round and just embarrass the PCs. And instead of being this, look, if we're being honest here as game masters, the boss fight should be a triumphant moment for your PCs. I mean, if you have any semblance of, trying to, respected narrative. If you're just playing like a hardcore simulationist game, then fuck them. I mean, like, power word kill them in the first round. I mean, just get it over with. But if you are in any way trying to sort of embrace a sort of heroic journey, then the boss fight should feel like a victory lap, right? It should feel like this moment where the party is kicking ass and taking names. And starting off your triumphant moment in this awesome ultimate fight by getting double crit by the boss and now you're dying too before you've even had a turn is a really shitty way to start any fight. So yes. Let's see here. Shadra says the monster creation tables in the GMG give some average HP values, which could probably be used as a base for figuring out average damage. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of back your way into it. All I'm saying is, also, I mean, I'm trying to design monsters for, everybody. Your PCs. If you have a barbarian and their dragon instinct, then you can, and they're using a maul or a great axe, then and they got a striking rune, they're doing 2d12 plus 4 from their strength, plus whatever it is, 6 or something from their dragon rage. They're doing 2d12 plus 10. And, you can factor that into, okay, what if he had a 45% hit rate and a 5% crit rate? Then his average damage would be this. And, you know, if you factor in the map attack, which is another half of that, it's like, that's him in a good round, is having a 2 attacks and at that rate of hitting. You can figure it out individually for your group. But it doesn't really matter if you get super precise about it, because there's a lot of dice rolls, a lot of swinginess. Things are going to happen anyways. But what this does is it kind of gives you a benchmark. It gives you a benchmark to say, if the party can do this, then they can beat the monster quicker. If the party can, you know, put their stuff together and really fight, then they can overcome the challenges. Ayla says, excessively high ACs are boring for no other reason than missing and doing nothing always feels bad. It's why PF2 spellcasters that know what they're doing usually avoid spell attacks like the plague. Absolutely. And I should point out, one of the other things that I realize is, you know, after playing Pathfinder for 3 years, it's like, you just got to throw out those high AC monsters. I mean, maybe it is a fun difference or fun challenge once in a while, but even in 4th edition D&D, be very careful about soldiers. Be very careful with soldiers, especially if you're ever going to use an elite soldier or a solo soldier. Be very careful before you do that, because high AC monsters are just boring. They're just very, very, very boring. Vin says, AoE is so important. Amen. And yes, at least multi-target. Yes, to generalize more than saying AoE. Yes, we should not be thinking about AoE. We should be thinking about the ability to attack multiple targets. But I also want to talk about something. We're actually going to go back to Triune here in a second. This is the other thing that I decided. Now, again, Triune was the last boss monster that I created. And while it did get embarrassed, it was because the party members were far more broken than I could ever hope to possibly make them. But the other thing that I want to do is, you know, the fact of the matter is, whether you want to admit it or not, okay, Pathfinder 2 and games like it, like 4th edition, have rotations. Yes, taking 20 was right. Okay. And what do I mean by rotations? I just mean that there is an optimal turn, okay, you would like to take. If you're a fighter with double slice, ideally you want to, you know, use your first 2 actions to double slice and then, you know, probably Flensing Rend. That is the ideal turn for you, because you're trying to do the most damage. And if given your druthers, that would be the best thing that you would do. If you're a Magus, then if you have Spell Strike up, the best thing that you would want to do is, I don't know, True Strike, Spell Strike, you know, or True Target Spell Strike or something like that, right? Like, there is an optimal thing that you would like to do on your turn, the thing that is going to, you know, heal the most damage, do the most damage, okay? The key is you need to disrupt this, okay? You need to disrupt this. If we take a look at something like the Eldritch Archer, this is a great example, okay? The Eldritch Archer gets kind of like a Magus ability, right? They can take 3 actions and they can Spell Strike. So if the Eldritch Archer has to move or has to do something else, then they won't be able to Spell Strike. Okay? If your fighter, who is double slicing, has to do 2 other things, then they won't be able to double slice. But rather than just saying you can't do it, what is interesting is to give your party member or to give your PCs a choice, because a choice is always better than just shutting them out and, like, I don't know, hitting them with a slow 1 or a slow 2. So let's go back to Triune. Okay. If we take a look here at Triune, now again, some of these are very inspired by MMOs. I'm not going to lie about this. Let's take a look at me. This was my guy, the aspect of domination, sort of the mental aspect of Triune. They killed him first, by the way. I did die first, but he had this ability, painful summons, 1 action. Okay. Notice there is no attack roll here. And the reason why, and it's very, by the way, this might seem kind of crazy. The reason why there's no attack roll here is because a saving throw or an attack roll is supposed to be because like the party member didn't get a chance. They didn't get a choice to get attacked. The monster just attacked them. And so you need to make that random. But the way this ability works is I target a creature within 300 feet. And then at the end of that PC's next turn, you measure the distance between Triune and that PC, and you multiply that by 5. And that's how much psychic damage they take. So if they're 100 feet away, they would take 500 damage. And then they make a basic will save, 0, half, full, double. So what does this end up doing? Well, it means that if I throw this onto a PC who is 50 feet away, now these were all high level, 20th level PCs, so take that for what it's worth. But if I throw this at a PC who's 50 feet away, they could do the mental math right now and say, okay, so this is 250 damage. And I might save, and I have Iron Will. I'm probably going to take, 125, right? Maybe. Between 125 and 250. And they can say, yeah, I could take that. Or they could decide, say, I've got boots of striding. I've got long strider cast on me. I've taken the fleet feet, right? My speed is, 40 feet. So I could burn an action and close to within 10 feet of the monster. And then I'm only going to take 50 damage, which is basically nothing at my level. But then I had to use an action. And I'm now closer to this big, evil, triumphant god monster who may have some really powerful melee attacks. The point is, the intention of this wasn't to necessarily punish or penalize the PCs. It was to give them decisions about how they wanted to use their turn and to sort of say, look, you can do whatever you want on your turn, but if you ignore these abilities, you will take more damage. Similarly, Aaron's aspect, the aspect of death, had the ability to summon a Starstone Strike, which basically called down a meteor, okay, and smashed into the party. Target any creature within 300 feet, no line of sight or line of effect needed. At the start of the creature's next turn, it would land on that creature. So in other words, the entire combat got one full round. Every PC would get one turn. This dealt 100 D12 fire damage and bludgeoning damage and force damage. So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of around 650 damage, which is enough to kill any PC. But note, the amount of damage is split evenly between the target and all adjacent allies. So if you could get 3 or 4 party members next to that target by the start of the next combat, then it might do 600 damage, but they each only take 100. Or one person could just get nuked from orbit and take 600, which, by the way, is what they chose to do because this was 20th level Pathfinder and the Barbarian had the ability to shrug off damage once a day. So the Barbarian Hanog just took a direct meteor hit, which, to be clear, was fucking awesome. But the point was, this ability isn't really designed to do damage. I mean, it does do damage, but what it really is designed to do is it's designed to keep the party dynamic. It's designed to have them moving around and having to make decisions about, do I just want to stand here and do my optimal rotation, or do I want to mitigate or otherwise avoid some damage? Yes, Shadram, if you recognize raids and if you've played MMOs and video games, yes, this is a stacking mechanic. Absolutely. Now, similarly, this one here, as an example. Now, I'm curious if people in chat can figure this out. So this was at phase 1. During the first part of the battle, a powerful vortex of energy begins gathering in the soul of Triune as the demigod reaches or nears apotheosis. A moment later, there's a blinding flash of light and a huge wake of elemental energy cascades out with terrifying force. Roll 1d6 to choose the elemental energy type. At the start of the Soul of Triune's next turn, there is a massive blast of energy. So in the first part of the fight, you would roll this, and then this wave of energy would go out exactly 1 round later. Again, making sure that every PC had a chance to take an action. It was a 250-foot radius, 100 D6 element damage, basic reflex save, but the DC for this was a whopping 50. Very difficult. Maybe if you're like a legendary rogue with a really high dexterity, you might be able to make this save. But even a lot of 20th level characters are going to fail that save and critically fail that save. 350 damage is no joke. But there was a special concept here. The target takes less damage depending on their current circumstance bonus to AC. And D Priest got it right. It's a get to cover mechanic. Because if the PC could just, hell, raising a shield gives you +2 circumstance bonus to AC. But if you have cover and you use the take cover action, then you get a +4 circumstance bonus to your AC and you take no damage from this. But and to do that, you had to be in cover and then take cover, right? And so what ends up happening is this, again, encourages and forces the PCs to have to make decisions. And by the way, sometimes those decisions are, my badass rogue doesn't give a shit about your 250 or 100 D6 damage DC 50. I'm going to pass that. And because of my evasion, I'm going to take 0 damage anyways. And that is its own way of feeling cool. Or somebody saying, you know what? I'm good. I'm just going to raise my shield. 50% damage, that's fine. And then I'll use a heal spell or a lay on hands, and I'll be totally fine. The point is, this is giving the PCs choices. It's not about just doing damage to them. It's about making them pick between fighting the monster and just piling deeps or doing other things and engaging with other things. Now, people mentioned earlier about having multiple things and other things to do. In this fight, yes, we mentioned, someone mentioned minions, but now, of course, again, these were high-level Pathfinder 2 characters with broken ability and loot. Somebody killed all of the minions in 1 bullet. Yeah, they had some sort of curve the bullet mechanic that they got from somebody who really liked Wanted, or maybe that was just an ability of the gunslinger. The spawn of Triune was a minion. Okay. By the way, this is interesting here. You can see how I did minions in Pathfinder 2. But anyways, in the second round, these creatures would keep spawning on the second part of the fight. These creatures kept spawning every turn. And they were, very dangerous and deadly. But as you can see, they only had 2 hit points. So, it's kind of a, and I should note here that a minion can never take more than 1 point of damage from any attack unless that attack or saving throw is a critical hit or a critical failure. So basically, these minions took 2 hits to kill, but they would die to a critical hit. And what ended up happening is all these minions came running out, and then one gunslinger used some sort of a gunslinger who had the beast gunner and had the spell trickster, and then used some sort of curve the bullet along with, they also had a gun that was called an actual gun, which was, again, some stupid broken item that someone handed out, which was like a 6-shooter. So they basically just do 6-shot, curve the bullets. They killed all the minions in 1 turn because they were critting all the time because they were a gunslinger. Long story short, these minions got embarrassed. But in a normal sense, where you don't have completely ridiculously broken PCs, this again is still sort of trying to deal with this. But here's the most important part. I'm trying to make these creatures minimally effective. Like, I don't want these creatures to have to be rolling dice and damage and everything like that. So when they hit, they just drain you, right? They don't actually do damage to you because I don't want to have to roll damage rolls as well. In fact, I've actually talked about changing this further and saying that minions should just do a certain amount of damage equal to your armor class minus a value. So for example, this creature, which has AC 38, let's say that this creature did 48 damage to a PC minus their armor class. There's no attack roll. There's no damage roll. It's just 48 damage minus your AC, or maybe make it easy, 50 damage minus your AC. So if a PC has 50 AC, because they're some champion with their shield up, they just take no damage. If your AC is 45, then you just take 5 points of damage each time. something along those lines. I use drained because drained is always going to be scary and it's always going to be effective. Anyways, self-confessed cynic said, did stuff in 4E do preset damage? I vaguely remember this. The minions did not roll for damage. They still rolled to attack. They still rolled to hit. They did not, but they did do preset damage, but they didn't roll. That is correct. So again, I thought that, again, I failed to take into account, and so we're actually, as we walk through Triune's design, you can actually kind of see where I think there are problems with stuff. Now, why do I ultimately say, we can get into all of this. Why would I say that Triune was a failure? Yes, the PCs were really busted, but the main thing I learned here is that I designed this creature to be very, very powerful and to present a variety of threats the PCs would have to deal with. There were 3 aspects to Triune: the aspect of power, the aspect of death, and the aspect of domination. The party, the final champions of Northport who fought them, immediately set upon the aspect of domination, and he never got to take a second action. What this meant was, as soon as that happened, the fight was already easy, because now it wasn't the party versus 3 really powerful creatures. It was the party, which was, tough, very, very tough. But now they're fighting 2 of the difficulty of the encounter immediately dropped by 33%. And Vin, you are 100% right. As a heads died, you lost actions. It was a death spiral. 100%. It was 100% a death spiral. And that is where I learned that the kind of multi-headed boss approach does not work. Now, I tried to adjust for this, okay? I tried to sort of, take this into account. Because, again, like when the final phase began, which is phase 3 after 2 heads are dead, there was this idea of this contracting aura that would crush and kill everybody. But, this monster, by the way, which had 1,000, 1,000, and 2,000. I'm sorry, 1,000, 1,000, and 2,000 hit points. Died in like 4 rounds. I should also point out something that was extremely ridiculous, which was this Soul of Triune was actually a separate thing on the battlefield. It was the thing that spit out this energy wave that would wash over people. And I kind of put this in here as a meme because it only had 100 hit points, but it had 100 resist all, and it had AC 55, by the way. I mean, if you look at some of these other creatures, AC 47, AC 49, AC 45. So this thing had an AC of 55 and 100 hit points and 100 resistance. And so I basically thought, I put it in there and gave it stats because I thought it would be funny. But turns out they had a Magus who had the ability to upgrade a D20 roll once a day. And so the Magus went in there with a spell strike and rolled a hit because they had such a high bonus to hit. They rolled a hit and then they upgraded it to a critical hit. And the Magus was able to do enough damage in a critical hit to overcome the 100 resistance and kill it in one blow. Even though this thing wasn't really technically designed to be invincible, I thought it was functionally invincible, and it died anyways, which removed this whole part of the fight from the fight very quickly. So never underestimate that. Essentially, you forgot that the most important aspect of a boss fight, a game as plus narrative concept, is the tension curve. Do the BS MMO thing where they have to die within a round of each other or the dead one's res. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that mechanic. I agree. I don't want to like get gotchas on my party at all. But you can see here that there were where is it here? Like, these are clearly rules effects. So I mean, I try to adjust this, Vin, like it says, this is Bob's character, the 2,000 hit point beefy guy. He has this nothing can hurt me ability while bloodied at 1,000 hit points or less, aka half hit points. Aspect of power gains an additional action and reaction each round. So right, it could try to sort of make it from that perspective. But you can see also things like I put an earth binding aura in because having people fly around and just not even be within reach of this creature is pretty stupid and boring. And I also have, this one here, Discordant Time. Taking the delay action deals 200 damage. Because this is the other problem with Pathfinder 2nd Edition in boss mechanics, is the delay action just makes it so that the party gets way too much advantage to be able to just delay without regards. Which is why I have kind of come around to the idea that I really want to sort of avoid giving the boss a round at all. I kind of like the idea that the boss or whatever just goes after every PC, or basically maybe only has reactions, or maybe it goes every 2 PCs. Okay. Because I think that ultimately, yes, this is kind of the idea that I think some of the people in the Discord kind of came up with. And I do believe that this is the best option. I think that in order to keep the fight feral and dynamic, because there's another problem, which I've seen before, where, you give a creature, because a lot of times people say, look, you don't want it to be PC, boss, PC, 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 PC. Okay. Number one, the party is just going to be able to delay, to set up, maximize their buffs and their debuffs. And it's just like, it adds a lot of overload, to the overhead to the initiative, and calculating all this initiative and all this other stuff. It's very, very, very complicated. And it just kind of slows the game down. It feels very gamey. It doesn't feel good. But a lot of people say, okay, so the goal is to put in a bunch of different other boss actions. I'm going to add in, my boss gets 3 turns in an initiative order. Okay. Well, the number one thing is the PCs are still probably going to, I've seen this happen more times than I care to admit. You do something like this, and what what the fight ends up looking like? PC, boss, 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 PC, 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 PC. Because everybody ends up just delaying so that they can stack all their frightens and prones and all this other stuff. And then the boss gets to go 3 times in a row. But the real problem with this is, even in this scenario where you have a boss and then a boss and then a boss, this PC here who goes last, like, this boss could attack them and then attack them and then attack them. And that PC got no chance to, do anything. Like, it's not his fault or her fault. She just didn't get a turn yet. But the boss got to go 3 times, and the boss could just attack one PC and just annihilate them and destroy them. So I think what is probably a better solution is to have a very reaction heavy boss, or, a boss that maybe as a free action, when a PC's turn ends, gets to do something. Not like a full turn, not like a big thing, but just enough to keep the combat feral. Because the other thing that you want to do, especially if you're talking about having a variety of PCs, and this is, by the way, the way that most Pathfinder 2 bosses work, and a fair number of 4th edition bosses work this way as well. Okay, let's say, we'll make this really easy, but let's just say every PC has 100 hit points. Okay. Well, the problem is that in order to make your boss a threat, okay, your boss has to do something like, 50 to 60 damage. The problem with that is, especially in Pathfinder 2nd edition, is that if your boss ever crits, you've just taken out one party member. And not only is that not particularly fun for that party member, but it's also not particularly interesting, because the party member didn't even really get to go. There's no counterplay to that. There's no tension of the damage building up. I would much rather, with a party of 5 PCs with each 100 damage, I would much rather do something like do 200 damage, but it gets spread out somehow, right? And, this PC goes down to 60, and this PC goes down to 50, and this PC goes down to 60, and this PC goes down to 30. And it's like, or did I get that right? 20. And it's like, oh, that was way more interesting because everybody gets to still do something. And now the party gets to sort of react and try to, heal up the damage or otherwise take some, certain advantages of things. It's not this sort of binary, you're either alive or you're dead. You're either alive or you're dead. There's a sense that this monster is going to keep doing 20 to 30 to 40 damage. And you're like, this PC might go, these two PCs might go, actually, we're probably okay. We could probably take another one of those before we would have to heal up or do something. Whereas this PC goes, I'm in trouble. And this PC is going, lucky day, I can do whatever I want. So lots of reactions, I think, is the key. Let's see here. Let's see here. One turn, a lot of reactions. It works super well in play. Okay, sweet. Reaction heavy boss sounds interesting. And boss moves every two PCs worked very well in our homebrew. Yes, that's the other thing. You got to keep the boss moving. Again, you got to throw Pathfinder 2 rules out of the window. A boss, again, just for the fact that if you're going to end up being like, well, look, the boss needs to make actions in order to do damage for this thing to even be remotely interesting. There's no way that I'm going to be able to move. And what ends up happening is this static combat emerges where you're not really doing anything. You're just standing around trading map attacks. And it's very, very boring. You need a way to let the boss move and engage, have the parties be running around and fleeing from it and causing all sorts of problems. The other thing too is when you have a boss that has a ton of hit points, then a single attack of opportunity, like in a Pathfinder 2 game, I mean, even a PL +3 boss doesn't really have that many hit points. And a single attack of opportunity with 0 map has a really good chance of actually really fundamentally skewing the game in the party's favor. But if your boss is designed to take many, many, many of these hits, you're going to have a lot more opportunity for tactical depth. Let's see. Boss focus firing one PC is a smart tactical thing to do. I agree, D Priest. Actually, I do agree with you. And I don't want a soft fudge. But it is not fun for the player. So what I would rather do is design a mechanic that makes it so that I cannot do that. Because yes, I could just rely on myself to be like, you're going to be a nice person. But then I'm soft fudging and I don't want to soft fudge. Yeah, I mean, this is Frostjack, that idea of action points. I mean, in 4th edition, they're literally called action points. They get 2 of them, and they can spend them to take an extra turn. 5th edition kind of has the concept of legendary actions. And I don't think that those are horrible ideas. I think that those ideas work really, really well. Let's see. Gossamer says, the last hour has been super interesting. Thank you. Yes, thank you for the support. Throw PF2 rules out of the window. I'm so proud of you, Dirk. If you want interesting boss fights, if you're fine with your standard, PL +3 or PL +4 monster that just, it just relies on raw math and, just high, the PCs have 12 actions. The boss gets 3 actions. So the PCs are going to miss, they're only going to hit 20% of the time. So they end up hitting with like 3 attacks on average per turn. So it all balances out in the math. That's fine. But I'm telling you that is a very boring fight, I think, for a lot of people. It's quick though. So if your group really doesn't like combat, I would continue to stick with that for sure. Claude says, boss gets actions when PCs do X type of action. Yeah, Claude, I really like that idea as well. And again, this is where we go back to the idea of building in other elements to the game. If you know that, every turn that unless somebody goes and makes a skill check or spends an action, at the altar of despair, then at the end of the round, the boss is going to shoot out a wave of death, right? So it's almost like you could take that idea and do the opposite of it, right? Which is, hey, if your character does something, I'm going to punish you for doing that. Not so much that it becomes undoable, but just as an example of showing how the boss is reacting to you. Frostic, no. Spending it outside their turn is definitely not raw. You did make that up. Yeah, like you have to spend the action point at the end of your turn to take another action. So yeah, I one of the things that we were talking about a couple streams ago, we talked about Fabula Ultima, and one of the things that Fabula Ultima has is this idea of these Ultima points, which are what bad guys get. PCs get hero points or Fabula points. Sorry. But the cool thing about these Ultima points is the idea is that you could fight this boss multiple times. And this Ultima points really is a resource that is going to get whittled down over the course of a campaign as the creature uses Ultima points to kind of cheat or show up or to, escape or avoid death. So it's like, oh, I'm going to cheat and escape death. And the PCs know this, and they know how many Ultima points they have. So it can feel like a source of progression, which is really, really, really interesting. And I like the idea of having a resource, whether it's extra actions, extra reactions, things that they can take advantage of. And the party should know that resource exists. If the boss has this like action resource pool and it starts at 10, and the boss, the PCs do something, and the PCs, do something in the combat, and that reduces it to 9. And the boss had to spend 1 in order to shake off the slow or the stun that you put on it, and that reduces it down to 8. Yeah, I think that is all really, really, really good idea. Jonka, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for the support tonight. Ben's White Dragon near the end of Northern Reaches had a combination of hazards and this one turn, many reactions concept. Yeah. And I think, I've said it before, I said it again. My community is sometimes smarter than me. Over the last year, getting an opportunity to see so many of the Northern Reaches raids and mega fights and bosses and stuff like that, has made me realize.
Corp tip $3 for boss fights only. Would you consider rolling initiative every round? No delay allowed? Would spice things up emo.
Yeah, but I hate rolling initiative already, Claude. So I agree with you. I think that does make it a little dynamic and crazy. It's probably actually not a bad solution, actually. Making delay really not worth it. But it also means you have to recalculate initiative every round, and that alone is probably not worth it to me. But it's not unthinkable that is a horrible idea. Exactly. Yes, I do hate initiative. So where was I going with this? Right. My patrons were right. Their boss mechanics were better than what I was kind of thinking about, because I've seen over the last year what has worked and what hasn't worked. And the issue really is, now there's a lot of different ways that you could do, I've seen some very complex mechanics. The infamous Vin progression resource boss mechanic is pretty legendary at this point. But like, I think that the key is you cannot rely on just having a boss with multiple initiatives or heads that whittle down, because what ends up happening, we've drawn this graph a lot, but if this is the tension of a combat, and these are the number of rounds, okay? And this is round 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6. A lot of D20 games start, the most tense is round 1. And then you kill the first monster, and then you kill the last, and then you kill like the second monster. And, what ends up happening really quickly is the fight loses its tension. And the longer the fight goes on, the more boring it gets. And we need to figure out a way, in my personal opinion, the ideal curve would look something like this. It would start at moderate tension. It would build by round 2. It would peak somewhere between rounds 3 and 4. This is sort of the do or die moment. And the party members feel like they have been on the back foot. They have been pushed back into a corner, but around round 3 or 4, they turn the corner. Not automatically win. We don't want to have the tension plummet off a cliff, just that it's now going down, going down, going down. And then it ends here. It doesn't end here, okay? It ends here. It ends at a good moment. Now, sometimes you might have a fight that ends like this, right? Where it's high stakes to the very last die roll, and it's do or die at round 6, and a party member hits a curve, and or a party member hits an attack roll. The monster's dead. Everybody else was about to die, and then everybody's cheering and happening and clapping. Now, that will happen sometimes, and that's awesome when it does happen. But you shouldn't try to engineer for that because it's very difficult to get right. I think if you aim for a fight that sort of tries to end its tension here, you're going to get fights that are going to peter out and still kind of be a little boring at the very end. And you are going to get fights that go nail biters to the end. But I will say that if all your fights are nail biters to the very end, you're going to end up with a lot of dead PCs and TPKs. Don't get me wrong. This experience right here, okay, where the tension builds, reaches a fever peak. It's do or die for several rounds, and then boom, the PCs land a critical hit. Somebody rolls an insane die roll, and then the tension drops to 0. Those are great fights, but you can't engineer them. Jonka, who is supposed to have left, $2 says, oh, and the idea of layer actions are cool piece. Yeah, I'm all for, you call them layer actions. In Pathfinder 2, it just means adding hazards to your fight. 4th edition does this really well. 4th edition talks about the terrain being an important element of a combat. And I think that whether it's a deliberate hazard or an environmental hazard, a magical hazard, sometimes, by the way, the hazard can even be like something that is, the PCs don't have to deal with it. They don't have to engage with it, but maybe they should. Like, imagine if you were fighting, just a normal encounter. It doesn't have to be a boss fight. You're fighting a fight in Pathfinder 2 or something, any D20 game, really. You've got your PCs who've come into the room, and, you've got some undead. There's some skeletons and there's some zombies in the room. Okay. Nasty stuff. And then in the center of the room, there's some sort of pillar. And once around, kind of like a lair action or kind of like a hazard, once around, it just shoots out basically a harm spell, just an AoE negative damage, which is going to damage the PCs and heal the undead. Now, the party could just completely ignore this and just burn the undead down anyways. And then once the fight's over, you don't really worry about the hazard, or the party can just avoid it, or, they take their time and disable it. But if they decide that this is a big enough problem and this is a big enough issue, they can deal with it. They don't have to deal with it, but they can deal with it. And that's what makes it interesting. Anyways, long story short, what we really want is this green progression. And we're stoked if we get the red progression, but we really want to avoid the black progression. D-Priest says, isn't that second curve more like what 13th Age aims for? D-Priest, yes. 13th Age has mechanics in place that are designed to sort of give the party a mounting advantage as the fight continues to progress. So that does help with that, because it means that the party is going to get stronger as the fight goes on. This tension curve is similar in my 12 to 18 round fights, which is still crazy, but often with a small break in the middle, e.g. an environmental change or temporary retreat. It's just classic storytelling. Yes, I think that having in any story, we have a series of acts, right? So you don't go, the tension of a story doesn't just go like this, right? Ideally, your tension kind of goes like this, there it builds and then it drops and then it builds and then it drops and then it builds, and then you have your denouement and it falls actions. Interestingly, this is one of the reasons why the Dread RPG, the game you play with the Jenga tower, works really, really well, because as more bricks get pulled out of the Jenga tower, right, everything that you're doing becomes scarier and scarier and scarier until the Jenga tower collapses and someone dies, but then you get to rebuild the Jenga tower. So now pulling blocks from the Jenga tower isn't really scary anymore until it gets more and more and more and more and more scary. Now the stakes are even, more intense, and you're down a PC, and then the Jenga tower falls, and everything's kind of yes, sure, someone PC died, but you rebuild the tower, and so you get to start the tension off again, right? And so that's why Dread works really, really particularly well for that. But this is how you would want your story structure to go. There is definitely a point to be made, Vin, about having your combat do the same thing. And by the way, we go back to 4th edition. When the party fought that dragon, which had the 3 phases, okay, this was sort of phase 1. And when the monster died, and, it collapsed to the ground before it spread its wings and launched into the air to become essentially an entirely new monster. What do I do at that point? You let the party, everybody gets to take a second win action for free. That's 4th edition term for basically a self-heal. Everybody is awarded an action point that they can use in this fight. It's like a kind of a reprieve, a brief moment for the party to sort of get a little hit points back, swig a drink of water, grit your teeth, and then you move into the next fight. I think that is sublime design. I think that those little brief moments, those highlight progression. That showcases what a party members, that the idea of the feeling that we are turning the edge. So I'm right there with you. I think that is a really, really great idea. Michael is correct. Yes, in 13th Age, you could think of it this way. In 13th Age, all of the monster stats are kind of like +1 to +2 points higher than they should be. So like the creature's ACs and damages and attack rolls are a little too high, right? Like to be truly balanced. And that's why like in round 1, when the bonus is 0 with your escalation die and it's round 1, the PCs kind of get their ass beat. And it's only by about round 3 when the escalation die is now at +2 that the PCs are kind of now on parity with what the monsters kind of innately got. And by the time you get to like round 5 and the bonus is at +4, now the PCs, now that escalation bonus is actually legitimately a bonus, and the PCs are going to start really kicking ass and taking names. Michael L. wasn't here at the beginning, but has anyone mentioned Flea Mortals from MCDM? It sounds a little similar at first glance. Michael, I am not familiar with the Flea Mortals. I did not kickstart that, but I do know that Matt Colville very much likes 4th edition D&D, and I know that he has taken a lot of inspiration and mechanics from 4th edition D&D concepts, so that doesn't really surprise me. I mentioned Permanent DM's 4E boss article before, which I've not read, Frostjack, but yes, I do remember that. It talks about using phases as acts of the fight. Yeah, it's not a big fan. Or I'm a big fan of that, for sure. Now, again, I do agree. Phases are great for doing this. But if you're going to use phases in a game like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you better strap yourself in. Because I think doing phases, I would say, if they're under 4 rounds long each, I think that is too short. Now, that being said, I mean, I think you could do, like a 6 to 8 round boss, and it could be one thing into 1-5, and then it becomes bloodied or, some arbitrary hit point value. And then it's a separate monster the last 3 rounds. I think people, phases can just be 2. I think 2 is okay. I think 2 is fine. It's a nice break. And then, you really ratchet up the tension before. Yeah. Phases aren't practical if your entire fight is going to be between 4 to 6 rounds. And that comes down to you and your players. I mean, if your players are in for a 4-hour boss fight slog, great. You've got a lot of real estate to play with. But I think a lot of people would not be interested in that. The other problem is that if a PC does go down, at least in a normal, fight in one of these D20 games, you could be roughly sure that the combat, as long as you die like literally in the first round, the combat's probably going to be wrapping up in the next 15 to 20 minutes. But if it's going to be a 4-hour fight and 18 rounds and you die in like round 2 or 3, what are you doing with, what am I even doing here? Right. What are we doing with our lives? Matt Rock says the bloody mechanic from 4E did great there. Lots of monsters got some trigger to change at roughly halfway. Yeah, it is a really great mechanic. And it's a great sense of progression because even if you're not giving your party members the hit points of your monster, telling them that it is bloodied is a great way to signify, hey, you did it. You did half of this monster's damage and you're on the way to victory. But also, there might be mechanics that now interact with this creature differently. And this creature might get new or special abilities because it is bloodied. I mean, yes, I don't think you haven't been on the Discord much, Vin, but lately, at least at the times when I'm awake. But I've been joking that I need to go back to the all spells ranked, and I need to update. You know, before we had slow as S plus, and we had slow 6 as S plus plus, and I said we need to take heal to like S plus 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 plus. Heal is just unbelievably powerful in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is another condemnation of the classic Pathfinder 2 monster, right? You throw a PL +3 or +4 monster at your party in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and you're expecting this monster to dish out 40 to 50 damage a hit, and your PCs, maybe have 120 hit points or something like that, because that's what the monster has to do. But because it's Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it only has 3 actions. So, it basically is going to strike and strike. I mean, it might do something, it might Draconic Frenzy or have something that's a little cutesy around it, but it's basically just going to strike. And that means it's going to probably end up doing about 100 damage, give or take, to this PC. And it doesn't drop them. Maybe if you crit, it does drop them. But, it's going to be, all of that damage is probably going to be focused into one PC, which means that when the cleric comes up and casts one of their 27 max level heals, and they pump 80 hit points into this PC, they essentially, for 2 actions, have time walked. They have made the boss skip their turn. Doing this kind of high damage, single target damage, which is what most monsters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition do, that whole strategy completely falls apart in the face of 2 action heal. It is by far the strongest spell in the game. It really just radically changes the way that the entire structure of the game needs to be fought. What becomes much more interesting is when you Strats 2 biggest bugbears are strike and heal. Arguably the 2 things that are the most common in the entire game. Aelis's heal is maybe the most impactful spell in the game. Yeah, and that's why I said heal really needs to be S++ tier. It really redefines the game, and a party that does not have access to heal functions on. I mean, Soothe is okay. I mean, it's still pretty good, but like a party with access to heal, ready access to heal spell is functioning on an entirely different level than a group that does not have it. And this kind of encounter, in my personal opinion, the PL +3 +4 boss doesn't work against a party that has access to heal. So let's see. Frostjack says, in the article, he recommends only doing 1 boss encounter per tier. Do I agree with that? I would say per half tier, Frostjack. Smith and I always kind of felt like the tiers in 4th edition were kind of divided into 2 tiers, like you kind of had your 1 to 5 heroic, and then you kind of had your 6 to 10 heroic. I don't hate the idea of doing like 1 per half tier. Cause like the reason we said this, Frostjack, is because, the weapons in the game go +1, +2, +3, +4, and then you get +5 and +6 weapons in 4th edition D&D. And so like we kind of equate the +1 as being like the 1 to 5, the +2 as being the 6 to 10. So that's kind of where we kind of ended up with that. But that's reasonable advice. I mean, if they're, they're not special if they're happening all the time. So yeah, I think what it really comes down to is you need to, in order to sort of fix the inherent problems with boss fights in D20 games. All right, going all the way back up here. These were, okay. Where did we go? We lost it. Did I lose my entire... Where the hell is it? Okay. Oops. Why does it always do that? It makes it look like that's the boss battle, but it's not. See, it says Triune. Okay, there we go. Hopefully this, there we go. Okay. So, tactical depth, target engagement, and priority. So, rule number 1. It can't just be the boss. You need to have other elements in your encounter. There needs to be hazards. There needs to be minions. There needs to be, even potentially boons that the PCs can gain. Go stand in this circle. Engage with other elements than just the boss. Right? You cannot just do that, because otherwise the tactical depth of your game is going to be very, very boring. Number 2, speaking of the tactical depth, you need mechanics that make the PCs make decisions. Agency, people. That's what makes these fights fun. Agency. All right? Oh, Sean, thank you. That is exactly what that did. So you need mechanics that are going to make the PCs make decisions. Your boss having a cool, fury attack that makes it make 2 strikes instead of 1 strike, or 3 strikes for 2 actions, is not making your combat any more interesting. If you remember some of those Triune examples I gave, I was trying to find mechanics that were going to encourage the PCs to kind of have to make decisions. Do I do this or do I do that? Do I move? Do I not move? Do I help someone or do I not help someone? I think that you need to give people these decisions because, right, as we said, there are rotations in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Yes, there are always going to be optimal lines of play that, assuming your goal is to, kill the monster, you're going to just do that thing. You need to give the players kind of tough choices, because if you just say, oh, you can't do that, well, that's not a choice. Instead, let the party, I think it's totally fine for you to say, oh, if you don't move, you're going to take a bunch of damage. And then, your baller ass cleric goes, yeah, you're fine. Just do DPS, man. Go wild. I got you. I'm going to heal you through that. That's a cool moment. That turns heal from this very passive, I'm just kind of reacting, to it's almost more of an empowerment. And the party members feel like you are enabling me to do what I want to do, which is just sit here and wail on this person. 3rd, action economy. This needs to be preserved at all costs. Do not rely on dwindling actions, okay? Multiple-headed creatures, something that has, it starts with 5 activations and then it goes down to 4 activations, then it goes down to 3 activations. Now, yes, you could make, as the creature loses activations, you could make those turns individually more powerful, but all you're doing is kind of reintroducing all of the problems that we were trying to avoid in the first place. And you're putting them at the end of your fight, and you're making the end of your fight very volatile. And, while there might be some value in that, what I have learned is to not do this. Instead, you need to think about things that allow the creature to continue to take multiple actions, to be present throughout the combat round. And also, by the way, remember too, that delay is already going to fuck with you on that. Reactions, or being able to take a free action when the party members end their turn, or every time 2 PCs go, the boss gets a free action to stride or leap or something that maybe even avoids attacks of opportunity. Something to keep the fight dynamic, to give the boss that action economy. Because if you start relying on dwindling actions, you're going to have the same problem that every other fight with multiple monsters has, which is once you've dealt with the first 1 or 2, the rest of the fight becomes sort of trivially easy. And you could make it that as the boss loses actions, the individual boss becomes that much stronger. But like I said, then you're just reintroducing the same problem that we were trying to avoid for the first part. As I keep going down this, let me see if there's anything here from the chat here. Vin says, I do 1 mega boss per story movement and a couple mini bosses per movement, but my campaigns run long. Yes, they do. No, Frost Jack, I'm sure you're doing a great job. I mean, I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'll take your word. Got it. It was a replacement, not a replacement for solos. I feel like a complex enough boss could be a true solo, but I've always had multiple win conditions, so I can't say I've tried it. I think dwindling actions can work well for newbies. That's part of why I kept it in the boss design summary for ages ago. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's definitely more forgiving. I mean, we can definitely say that, but I think you're going to lose the tension. If you kind of rely on that. 4, don't forget your progression. Now, part of the reason why I got so obsessed with dwindling actions is because I do think that progression is important. I think the PCs need a way to sort of experience the thrill of success, because we're playing a game where the monster just dies at 0. And so up until that point, the PCs have accomplished nothing. And it can feel very, very, demoralizing. Now, phases help with progression. They give a sense that the fight is changing. But I like the idea, which has sort of come up in tonight's stream, of if you are going to do some sort of phased progression, whether that's just sort of, pre-bloodied, post-bloodied, or maybe you have a defined set of 3 different steps of the encounter. Don't forget to give the PCs a little respite right here. Some sort of bonus, some sort of something. It could even be everybody gets a hero point. If you're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, when the party gets to this point, give everybody a hero point. When they get to this point, give everybody a hero point. Like, that's going to feel, really, really exciting, because the party's going to feel like, yeah, we just beat the monster and now it maybe is more tough or stronger. We have to fight it again. But you're reminding us that we're doing a good job. You're reminding us that we are winning, that we are starting to turn the tables, that we are heroic, that we are kicking ass. And I think that trying to emulate that sense of building tension, party gets a little bit of a reprieve, but then the tension builds even higher, and then we get a little bit of a reprieve, and then it goes to the very end of the fight, and we win the fight, and the tension drops off. This is where we really want to be, and this is what you need to sort of figure out how to do it, as a mechanic. Claude says Wheel of Pain between phases instead. Exactly. Just hurt them. Oh, you finished the phase, spin the wheel. Oh, everybody dies instead. Getting a full round off is not a bad idea, right? Lets the party recast buffs or heal, any of those things. I think that's a really good idea. But remember, Bob didn't notice the tension loss versus New Eliab. Well, Bob's not going to notice, Bob's not going to notice much, but that is neither here nor there. So yeah, I think the real takeaway from today's stream should be that, I was wrong and my patrons were right. That using the kind of dwindling action is not a great solution. You need to be more creative with that. I think the one thing, though, that we can all agree on is, in my personal opinion, while it may mathematically work, the standard Pathfinder +2, PL +2, PL +3, +3 +4 monster, to me, is just going to be a very boring encounter. I have made it a point in my games to really avoid throwing anything higher than a PL +2 at my party in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because anything above that +3, I think, just becomes boring, swingy. The PCs are basically going to miss almost like a very high percentage of the time. The monster's going to basically pass every save that, you throw at them. And I just don't think it's really fun or engaging or interesting. I'd rather either use different mechanics and come up with something that I back myself into because I understand. I'm like, hey, I want this creature to last for 6 rounds, and it needs 600 hit points to do that.
Mighty Dave tipped $5. We can all agree on Derek being wrong.
Thank you, Mighty Dave. Yes, we can all agree on that. Thank you for the tip, and thank you for pointing out my wrongness. There's some interesting board games that are all about fighting boss monsters like Oathsworn, etc. I haven't played them, but I wonder what sort of mechanics we could steal. That's a great question, Hoyrit. I have not played Kingdom Death Monster or Oathsworn, so I would be interested to know what those mechanics are. Can we see some reactions that could work well for these kinds of bosses that are reaction based? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a couple of things could be like, because if you have like a reaction, if it's like a reaction based attack, so like you might have a reaction that's like, when the boss is missed. And this is like the most basic example of this, right? They make like a quick slash. And instead of doing the 50 to 60 damage that we would be expecting for this higher level monster, it's only like 15. You don't want the party member to feel like this is like the attack of opportunity problem, right? Where like you give somebody an attack of opportunity, it's a 0 map attack. You feel like an asshole, like, so you just not end up provoking the attack of opportunity. You don't want this to be something that is so extreme that we get back to the problem of the fight being super, super swingy. But what you do is you make the monster feel really, really dangerous. And here's what's really cool about it. It means that, remember, we've lowered the AC. We've made our monster hittable on an 11 or higher. And maybe the party members have done their due diligence and they have buffed and debuffed and flanked and done all the stuff that you're supposed to do. And now maybe they're hitting on an 8 or higher against this boss. And so that first attack with that first action is great. But the second attack at map is still a viable option, but the party knows that every time they attack, if they miss, the boss is going to get to slash out at them and deal damage. And so now, even making that second attack or that third attack becomes a little bit more dicey. It becomes a little bit more pricey. And the party member is going to be able to make a decision about, should I attack or not? Is it worth it, me getting extra damage in because I have a 60% chance of missing and just taking this damage? But it's also not so much damage that it's a no-brainer. Like if it was when the boss is missed, the quick slash deals, 55 damage, you would just basically be like, okay, that just means attack once, never attack again, because it's not worth it. You need to find, and I don't have a magical formula here. Everybody's thresholds are going to be a little bit different. But if it's like when the boss is missed, quick slash does like, 10% or something, 15% of the person's health in damage, then suddenly you just get into this fun, interesting rhythm. You could also have a thing where it's like, when they're hit by a certain type of energy damage, instead of something boring like resistance or vulnerability, have it be that like when the creature gets hit with, cold damage, that they, maybe they become energized and, they start radiating out a cold aura, and maybe they take, maybe somehow, maybe cold does something else to them too, but maybe it also allows them to make this extra attack. So it's like the party feels like their actions are creating this dynamic effect. Basic version. Take a PL +2 or a +1 with bumped hit points and damage and give them fun reactions and let them take more than one reaction per turn. Add a multi-target hazard, use creativity to mix with them. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really about it. I mean, you can come up with much more complicated aspects to that, but I think what it really comes down to is do not want the stats to be astronomical. You do probably want to give them more hit points so that they can, live long enough to actually be interesting and fun. It also is going to decrease the volatility and variability that are inherent with these high PL monsters. Those monsters are very swingy. You need to make sure that your boss is capable, or that your encounter is capable of attacking, attacking all of these different aspects. You don't want just the party members to just be able to solve every issue with just, one set of actions. You want there to be a variety you want damage to be spread out. You want some people to be on fire. You want some people to be hit with affliction. You want some people to be worried about a hazard, because that's going to make the party member go, on my turn, I really need to think about what I need to do. And I really have to make an interesting decision. Hoyrit says, when you're spending time making up all these mechanics, it really feels like you need to do some play testing to make sure they work. Alas, Hoyrit, I mean, that is sort of the ultimate GM's conundrum, right? Every GM has the ability to make up rules and change monsters. Ultimately, if you're doing these type of things, you need to be open to the idea that when you play it with your party members, you may have made a mistake. I do not condone fudging, but what I do condone is a GM admitting their mistake. If you're halfway through a fight and you realize that you way overtuned this monster, then just simply say, you know what, listen, ladies, I messed this monster up. I didn't think about how powerful this ability would be. So how about we kind of roll this back, or I'm just going to say, everybody, we'll just erase this ability for the rest of the fight because it's just too powerful. And, you're playing amongst friends and, you don't have the time to sit there and, use it over and over and over again. Now, yes, I mean, Self-Confessed Cynic is right about that. I mean, the numbers in Pathfinder 2 do just add up, but they're also prone to being very boring. So the only thing I'm not sure about, I'm enthused about or not about, is this extra reactions. It makes the bosses feel like they are playing a different game than the players. And John, they are. That is true. They are playing a different game, because I fundamentally believe that Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because of the way the action economy works, the only way to make people be able to play on the same playing field, say 3 actions versus 12, is to make your character, that boss, so much more powerful. And I think that introduces way too much variability and volatility into your fight. And I think it also makes it too easy for the PCs to minimize or deal with the monster. And more importantly, I think it's just a very boring experience as a player to know that even your best attack might only have a 30% chance of hitting, or that the boss has something like an 80 or 85% chance of passing the save that you throw on it, spell on it. And that basically the reason why you're winning is just you're zerging it. You're just weight of actions. Yes, individually, each of us is going to miss a bunch, but there's so many of us compared to it that we're just going to just zerg it down, right? And the party members should never feel like the zerg, right? They should never feel like they are the mass horde of, people that are just bringing someone down through a bevy, a flurry of shitty, inaccurate attacks. I don't like that kind of feeling that it promotes. Matt says he'll fudge. I'm just honest about it. Yes, I'm okay with being honest in that point and saying, look, I messed up, or wow, this was way more powerful than I ever imagined it would be. This was not a fair fight, and this was intended to be a fair fight. So, we'll do a redo, we'll reset. Maybe we'll wipe the whole fight. Whatever. Let's talk about it as a group of adults and figure out what we're going to do. I will admit that I agree with what Vin is saying here. I tend to use the damage and DC columns more. The HP column, and in my opinion, the AC column, which is also a little too high, but I think the AC column should be a little bit lower, or more like as monsters get higher level, they just all start using high and extreme. But the HP, I think, is just not high enough. I think monsters melt too quickly in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Yeah, I don't mind commanding. I mean, I like the idea of a boss that can, use its actions to sort of have these really powerful secondary characters that they can then kind of empower through their action. So then the party has an interesting decision, because they're like, well, the secondary characters don't really matter. We should just focus on the boss. But if we just ignore them for the entire fight, then the boss is going to make them really, really powerful, and they might kick our ass. So we should probably go deal with them But if we're dealing with them, we're not dealing with the boss. So it's kind of like this, kind of yin yang problem. That is kind of what I try. Yeah. Warlording, Matt. That is kind of what I try to do in the Triune battle in phase 2 by introducing the spawn of Triunes, which are these minions. By the way, this is the ability. It's a reaction to me, my children. When the first aspect of Triune, remember there are 3 of them, is slain, the fight enters phase 2. In place of the old Triune's initiative, add the spawn of Triune. Immediately, and on the Triune's future turns, add 6 spawn of Triune minions to the island map edge and immediately give them a stride. So basically, once that happened, you would be adding these minions every round until the party went into phase 3. Because the spawn of Triune no longer continue to be added, although the ones in play remain. So the party could, in theory, ignore all of these creatures that are appearing every turn because they don't matter. Not really. What you need to kill is Triune. But if the party has to kind of decide between, do I deal with the spawns or do I deal with the boss? I think those are interesting decisions. By the way, as I said before, Unfortunate Pumpkin killed them all with like 2 or 3 shots from his 6-shooter gun. That was also a animal beast. I don't remember. It's just ridiculous. And long story short, what's actually funny though, while we're here, someone asked me, did the party have access to these mechanics beforehand? And the answer is some of them, yes, because this was the final raid. By the way, this was 12 PCs that took on these monsters. That was a raw ability, by the way. Okay, but the gun wasn't. Because only some members of the community were able to play in this, what I allowed the other community members to do as the chosen champions went to go fight the powerful god, nascent would-be god. They got to make recall knowledge checks, basically, like in our Discord beforehand, and everybody that passed, I would give them another tidbit of information about what the creature could do. They could then, and enough PCs were high enough level that they might not have been able to join the fight, but they were able to provide some insight about the creature. And that's where most of these things came from. I copied them and pasted them because the PCs had some idea of what they were going into. But what's funny is Bob played the aspect of power, and again, everything about this, map attack, Mac attack, all of this stuff here was just part of it's just to make fun of Bob as just being this big dumb brute. And then the aspect of death was designed to be kind of making fun of some of Aaron's fatalism. All of you are so weak, just let go, very Aaron stuff. Anyways, I was the aspect of domination, which was kind of like the mind control one. And my was picked to be destroyed because the party, inexplicably, it just shows you, the party, the 12 max level PCs, near max level PCs, were so afraid of this ability. Okay. So this was called Brain Bore, which was this creature. Now, to be fair, this creature was more of a spellcaster than anything, but it had this ability called Brain Bore. And by the way, I was completely inspired by the brain bugs from Starship Troopers. And they have this, like this little spiky thing that they stick into people's brains, right? And suck out their brains. And in the movie, they talk about how, like, they got inside the guy's head and they made him call for help, even though it was an ambush. Anyways, so Brain Bore, a series of chitinous segmented tendrils move outward from the bulging brain stem of the aspect of domination, seeking eyes, ears, or just a soft spot in the skull. And it was a strike and it did damage, but what it did was it also afflicted the stupefied condition, to stupefied 2 or stupefied 4 on a critical hit. But then it had this ability called brain burrowing. So you could think about the brain bore, it hits, but then it can spend an action to brain burrow. And what brain burrowing did was tendrils flex and pump, and what's left of your brain matter gets slurped up. Again, very much inspired by Starship Troopers. So basically it was like a constriction, but instead of it being a constriction, it was sucking your head. And it did more psychic damage and it did more, stupefied. But it had this thing. This stupefied stacks on top of any other stupefied condition you already have. So brain burrowing could just fort save, stupefied. If your stupefied value is greater than or equal to your intelligence score, you become a permanent thrall of Triune. You forever become an NPC, and your stupefied value resets to 2. So the part, basically, if this thing sucked out your brain, you became an NPC. I knew that this had like no chance of happening because this thing would have to just like get a low int PC, hit it with its brain bore, and then like use at least 2 or 3 actions to brain burrow and suck out its mind. But the PCs were so horrified at the idea of one of them becoming a permanent NPC that they decided before the fight began that my aspect, this aspect of domination, was going to be priority target number 1 until they took it out, because they were so afraid. They were not afraid of Smith calling down comets from orbit, or any of Bob's just incredibly brutally damaging attacks. Nope, they did not want to become an NPC, so they targeted me down, burned me down real quick before I could really get anything done. But anyways, just goes to show you how PCs work. Are funny. 12 PCs. Okay, I'm a little less overwhelmed at high level Pathfinder 2nd edition play. Yeah, D Priest. This is not a usual what I would normally encourage you to run against even a group of 4 PCs. This was designed to fight against 12 PCs. And again, they had so much broken treasure and loot, they actually kicked these things' ass pretty quickly. Yes, it was very much a raid boss. Right. It was Thin Wizzy's gun. Pumpkin's gun wasn't from himself. That's correct. And that is true. Not everybody was max level. There was like 7 level 20 PCs, and then we had a bunch of 19s and then like 118 or something. The party was more afraid of themselves than of a god. Yes, exactly. If someone became an NPC, that would be just too powerful. One of these broken PCs in the hands of the gun game masters, that would be too powerful. Yeah, nobody wants to deal with a brain-eating cosmic horror. I mean, listen, anybody who knows anything knows that the most dangerous person in the party is another member of the party. I remember one of the early Wheel of Pains had, somebody became possessed and the chat voted for Bob, and everybody was like, what a gift. You should have picked the sorcerer or the wizard. He would have dropped nukes on everybody and just blown everybody to pieces while also eating up all of their high level spell slots. But anyways, so, again, I really tried to address, certain key issues with this build and make a really engaging and fun attack. But what ended up happening? I gave it 3 heads, and they took this one out, and then they took this one out, and then this one was not a big deal, because at that point, 2/3 of the creature's power was gone, and that was a big lesson for me in terms of failing. So, yeah, I thought this was an interesting conversation. I mean, there are so many instances of where, we could probably get into the weeds and try to design like what is ultimately a cool boss. And maybe we should do that in the future, because I think that'd be a fun opportunity. But, I did want to bring up one thing. Bosses don't just have to be fights. Last Friday, the group, we're playing Legend of the Five Rings. They went to go have a meeting with Doji Horika, who is this advanced crane courtier. And it was the party versus this single crane courtier. Now, it was a social combat. It was an intrigue is what the game calls it. Matt, thank you again for your incredible support. Enjoy your Padres baseball. They have a beautiful stadium. Do you think a dwindling pool of action points runs into the same issue as the 3-headed boss? If you're relying on those action points in order to make the boss interesting, yes. Yes. I do. So this group went into I'm gonna bust out the whiteboard again. Hold on. Real quick. So you have 4 PCs 4 samurai from the Lion Clan, and they are actually seeking this woman's husband who is missing. So you've got where's my oh no, I think my thing died. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Boom, there we go. Okay, so you have Akoto, Taisho, and you have Ikoma, Enjo, and you have Matsu, Hachi, and Kitsu. I don't remember actually Bob's name. Kitsu Bob. I don't actually remember Bob's PC's name. Anyways, so it was these 4 lion samurai versus Doji Hiroka. Thank you, George. Hikari. So in a social scene, how do we make sure that we keep things interesting, that we give the PCs a lot of different things that they can try to do? Now, they were coming into this social scene because they wanted to get information from her about where her husband was, because her husband was a member of their clan and missing, and they wanted to find out where it was. But they also knew that they couldn't just come out and ask it because that would be very rude. And so what ends up happening in the game is there are a variety of objectives on the battlefield, and we just represent these by note cards. Now, one is, where is the guy? And the PC, ostensibly, this is the most important one. But there were other things too, because Doji Hiroka had her own goal, which was to seduce Hachi and make him fall in love with her and try to use that to her advantage. And Legend of the Five Rings is a game where, yes, this kind of thing can happen, where if a PC or if an NPC accomplishes their social goal, they can also manipulate or change a PC's behavior. So, but they didn't actually know what her goal was. So they were also trying to figure out, like, what's her angle, and what is she up to? What is she trying to accomplish? What is she trying to do? Meanwhile, what ends up happening is Doji Hiroka isn't able. This is how wild this thing got. Doji Hiroka wasn't able to seduce Hachi because this guy was just too good of a politician. So instead, she changed her objective mid combat, if you will, to seduce Bob's character. And Bob's character got seduced and fell in love with her through the course of it. So Bob's character, Bob playing in character and also following the mechanics of the game, abandoned this objective to create his own new objective, which is get her to sleep with me. Now, Bob started making progress on this objective instead, but then Kaz, who plays Matsuhachi, got jealous because him and her used to have a thing back in the day. So he created a new objective, which was to cock block Bob and make sure that Bob didn't actually sleep with this woman who was in another lifetime his girl. And long story short, she ends up becoming so frustrated and flustered because of these two people kind of having a pissing contest over her, that in a very unsamurai-like fashion, she died in social combat sense, which meant that her strife became greater than her composure. And composure is sort of like your mental hit points. Her strife became too high, and Doji Hiroka fled the scene in a kind of hysterics, which is very, very, embarrassing for a samurai and very, 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 bad for her. And also probably going to make her really have some anger issues towards them for embarrassing her so much in her own home and for being a high-ranking samurai. But more importantly, she fled before they could ever find out where her husband was. They got a little bit of information. So it's like they won because she, you know, she technically fled the scene in embarrassment, which is kind of a good thing. But they also they weren't able to finish their goal because 2 other PCs ended up doing a bunch of other stuff. So the takeaway for this was, why was this so successful? Arguably, it's because there was a lot of different things for the PCs to do. And there was a lot of different angles. And some of them, to be fair, were created by the PCs themselves. But it wasn't just, hey, I make a check to convince her. What are you doing? I make a check to convince her. What are you doing? I make a check to convince her. Okay, you earn victory points. You earn victory points. You earn victory points. All right, she doesn't have enough victory points yet for her to tell her. Let's go into the next round. What do you do? I convince her. Okay, make a diplomacy check. Okay, you get some more points. You make a diplomacy check. Okay, you got a Jeff. She gets enough points. Okay, she won. Now, if that sounds boring to you, that's the way a lot of fights run. I attack it and do damage. Is it dead yet? No. All right. Well, the next person will attack it and do damage. Is it dead yet? No. Okay. We keep doing that till it's dead. This had this extreme, it sounds like everyone lost. It sounds to me like everyone lost. I mean, yes. Well, the best kind of encounter. I mean, the other thing about it is, like, these things in this game, you know, like, for example, you know, that Bob's character gained a disadvantage. That's how this works mechanically in the game. She was able to give him a permanent disadvantage, which is in love or obsessed with Doji Hiroka. So Bob's character maintains that. His character is now going to have this, this disadvantage, which I might, pressure and push and, make it his character's ninja, which is his, his secret desire, his secret objective. And it might cause him to become distracted from his samurai mission, which of course is what samurai drama is all about. Yes, Kaz did successfully cockblock Bob, so he did kind of win. So yeah, Kaz was able to do that. But I mean, at the end of the story, at the end of the day, it was really, really an interesting encounter. And it was against this very, quote, high level political figure. But what made it fun is that there were, a bunch of different things that the PCs could go do. If it was just them making checks to find out where the guy was, then I think it would have been a very boring set of circumstances. But because she had her own goal that they were also trying to figure out what it was, and then they tried to counteract, and then she changed her goal, which then made Bob change his goal, which then made Kaz change his goal. It ended up being this really, really fun encounter. And of course, despite the fact that it was really driven by dice rolls, incredible amounts of, role-playing occurred during this entire scene. I mean, it's always role-playing, but, describing your character's actions, describing your character's thoughts, feelings, motivations. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I taking this action? But at the end of the day, still engaging with game mechanics, getting to roll dice and finding out what interesting thing is going to happen as a result of those dice rolls. So I thought it was really, really cool. But it's an example of how these principles, I think, learning from the sort of Triune failure about what, ways to make boss fights more enjoyable and to have sort of more interesting things. Now, I would even say, too, I think that fight versus Doji Hiroka could have been a lot more interesting if I had included, maybe a lesser secondary samurai that was sort of maybe a third player, not necessarily like an ally of Doji Hiroka. Maybe there was a scorpion courtier at that, as well. So you have the lion PCs, you have the crane, and then there's the scorpion who's sort of like, they have their own agenda. But the PCs don't really technically care about the scorpion, but they might be like, well, what is the scorpion trying to do? And that, I think, would have been even more interesting. So that's kind of the equivalent of putting a hazard into your battle fight, into your encounter for your boss. All right, it is 10 o'clock. These battle ones always, these PF2 philosophy idea ones come out, thing. Of course, again, I want to say thank you to my patrons, everybody who's just showered us with amazing displays of support these last couple of months. Everybody a member of the Patreon, everybody who's upgraded recently, even our new members who are just coming in and joining at these higher tiers so that they can play Northern Reaches or so that they can really show their love and support for the channel. I mean, it's one thing to have some of our people who've been with us 2 years upgrade to Hero or Exalted or Legend, but we had some new people who've only been with us less than a month who said, this community is so amazing and so inspiring. Yeah, I want to upgrade. I really want to show my support for you and the community that you've built. And that is not a testament to me. That is definitely a testament to the incredible KLC community. So if you're interested in checking out, you're not a member already, I highly suggest it. Link in the description below, patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. Thank you to everybody who supported us tonight. Thank you for everybody who came up and gave us a super chat and tip. I appreciate it. You guys made this a nice little stream. I know we didn't stream on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're going to be back for a normal stream. We'll probably do something not Pathfinder 2 related. We'll probably dig into something, maybe do a first look or something. Patrons will get to kind of vote on it. And then 2 Tuesdays from now, July 18th, it's going to be Root Session 0. We're going to be back in the studio. Bob and Smith and Dirt and Nick. And we're going to be making small anthropomorphic rodents and beavers and whatever. And it'll be great. Join us again on Boss Land next year. I mean, there's only so much time for live streams. And I understand that we have some community members and some viewers who really like these conversations. And we also have some people who are like, look, I don't really care about the nitty gritty. Some people they'll go, I like Pathfinder 2. I just don't like this idea of boss fights. So it's like, it's a small niche. Robots. I heard it. I misspoke. There is a mechanical marquee in the one expansion. I think it's in the Riverfolk expansion, the mechanical marquee. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. A month from today, I'm going to be at Gen Con, and I have no idea what is going to be going on at Gen Con. So I don't know if we're going to do a live stream from there. I don't know. I have no idea what my plan is for Gen Con. So should definitely start to figure that out. I know we're going to have some patrons there. It's going to be awesome. We're going to try to do some more meetups like we did at Origins. Hopefully I get a chance to see you there. If you see me walking around with my nice last call shirt and you want to stop by and say hi and tell me how wrong I am about something, I would be happy to hear it. Vin says, now that initiative and reactions are kind of settled, next time we should go into what makes good boss actions and how to use the action economy. Absolutely. I think that is definitely the next step. And I think, because again, it's not that I disliked the Strat, Vin, Donnie amalgamation that we had. It's that it was very complicated and it required a lot of, learning and hoops to jump through. Ideally, I do appreciate simple ideas that are executed well, that make sense without requiring a lot. I mean, Magic the Gathering is the king of this, of course, that rely on a sort of an innate sense of knowledge that things work the way that you expect them to work. But I would like to get to a point where we can actually legitimately sit down on one of these streams and probably have some guests on, maybe someone like Vin, or maybe a couple other of our hero tier or higher patrons who could come on here and we can just kind of brainstorm and collab and come up with a kind of groupthink and come up with a really cool couple boss ideas here on the stream. Great stream, says Ayla. Got some good ideas. By the way, when do we get a tip goal to make Derek play a video game on stream voted on by the community? Oh my God. That would be a very expensive tip goal. Like I said, I came this close to playing Final Fantasy 16. And then I saw that it was basically an action RPG. And I also saw that my buddy sent me a thing and it said, he sent me an article actually to Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16, a spectacularly soulless experience, a PS5 review. And I was like, oh, great, good. Because inevitably the community would vote for something horrible. They would vote for like an anime. They'd vote, like Persona would probably be like my worst case scenario of all time. I mean, at least that's technically an RPG. Like, I don't think they would make me play like a shooting game because it's probably not as likely to like tilt me and like get me upset, right? Like it needs to be close enough to what I like that it like bothers me, right? Like if it's something I don't care about, maybe someone will be like really nice and vote for like, Total War Warhammer 3. And then it'll be like, okay, I've been meaning to pick this up for like the last year and still haven't done it. But I absolutely love the Total War series. If you wanted to know what kind of video games does Derek like, I like SimCity, Minecraft, Total War. I like games that don't really have a story. Like if my game had no cutscenes in it, I'd be okay with that. Been confirming I will not like 16. Yeah, I mean, I read a little bit more about it too. It just seemed like such a mess. Bloodborne, great boss mechanics. I do not know Bloodborne. An anime visual novel like Hatoful Boyfriend? That sounds like the worst possible thing I could ever imagine. 100% it should be something Derek would love if it weren't for one or two things. Right. Like, yeah, it's got to be like, oh, it's an RPG. Derek loves RPGs. Derek does love RPGs. Oh, but it's so horrible and, horrible. Yes, Total War is amazing. Yeah, Total War series has been, for me, like one of the greatest video game, like in terms of series. Not all of them have hit, but I have played most of them, I think. Some of them weren't as good as some of the other ones, but I really just love the series. And I stopped playing Warhammer when Age of Sigmar came out because the tabletop minigame, number one, my buddy who I played with moved to California. But number two, also, we just didn't like Age of Sigmar at all. And I like Rank and Flank. And the Total War Warhammer series has allowed me that sort of old world, dwarves are dwarves, high elves are high elves, wood elves are wood elves, not this 8 realms of chaos bullshit. And yeah. Now, Sean says he thinks I'd like the minimal narrative of Elden Ring. But the problem with Elden Ring is I don't really like Twitch-based games. Like, I don't like games that are like timing and like the whole Dark Souls thing holds no appeal to me. None. What do I think of the new highly emergent new Zelda games? Well, the last Zelda game I played, Frostjack, was Twilight Princess on the Wii. So I have not played a Zelda game in a while, but it's my understanding that, you kind of just run around and get into actions and do stuff, which is cool. But they've also kind of made it very Minecrafty and like weird. And like, I don't know how much I love that aspect of the game. I keep seeing all these weird things that people are doing with the stuff. And it's just like you could put it together and it works because of physics engine. These are nothing. Okay. These are nothing like Twilight Princess. I mean, I thought Twilight Princess was great. I did enjoy Darkest Dungeon 1. I played it when it was very early. But fundamentally that had a lot of things going for it, D Priest, that I really did like. I liked the difficultiness of it. I liked that it wasn't like this. It was more strategic than it was like, action based. And I really thought that was really good. Bloodborne is a Souls game. Yeah, no. I think Derek would legit like the new Zelda. It's possible. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've seen about it. Like a lot, like for example, number one, I understand the game design principle about it, but like, here's how you know that this is a case. I've seen a lot of people complain about weapon breakage in the Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. I think that is brilliant. I think that is great game design. I think that is so smart. So it's like, so some of the things that like a lot of community members do not like about that game, I actually think is really smart. And I think I would really enjoy that. I enjoy that kind of challenge. Like the fantasy of, oh, just give me my cool sword. I just want to hack people with my big sword. I don't ever want it to change. Like that doesn't affect me. Like, when I play like a Total War game, like in contrast to like some of my buddies who I know who play it, like if I fight a battle and I lose, I don't reload the game. Like I've played Total Wars plenty of time where I've gotten to the point where, it's turn 90 or something and I'm in an unwinnable spot. I've just put myself in a position where the enemy's too strong. I don't have enough resources to get out. And basically I just restart the game, because, I didn't do it right. I like having these kind of in these challenges that I need to kind of think my way through. And I don't like to just, soft reset things. It's good stuff. All right. Fear and Hunger is a turn-based RPG. It's a horror dungeon crawler set in the dark and hopeless dungeons. Here's the thing though. See, Darkest Dungeon, I think, did a good job of being kind of funny about it. Like it wasn't like trying to be edgy. It was almost trying to be like funny about how edgy it was trying to be. I don't like when things are just like, it's so grim dark, it's so edgy. My tastes are it's a razor's edge. It's a razor's edge. The mistake here is that now Derek has told us what he likes. There's no way that'll win the poll for community voted game. I mean, listen, people can vote with their conscience. Oh yeah, that whoever did that voice narration in Darkest Dungeon is so good. Desperation, the mark of the truly damned. It's so good. Yeah, people missing the point of the weapon durability mechanic is so McCain to me. It's such an important part of the game. Yes, exactly. I haven't even played the damn game, and I just got it. I just got it immediately. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That is so smart. Best Derek stream game would be Fire Emblem, tactical RPG, but just anime enough to annoy him without being off-putting. That is possible. I am sort of tangentially aware of the Fire Emblem series. Mostly through Marth and Roy from Super Smash Brothers, but anyways. That's very good. Sounds like this poll idea has merit. Well, needless to say, it would be a Patreon poll. So if you want to decide what video game, I mean, here's the real question. All right. I don't even know how many people are here. Probably nobody, because we're just kind of bullshitting now. We got 58 people. All right. And I mean this legitimately. And I'm not trying to be like some, like, all right, here it is. Like, we're here for role-playing games. Okay. I get it. Now, I understand people like to see me suffer. That is a given. But I'm just legitimately wondering, like, does anybody actually I know we're joking about it, but does anybody actually want to see me play a video game? Probably get mad about it, depending on what video game it is. But one of the things I don't like to do, is this is a role-playing game channel, right? It's for role-playing games. I sometimes I see content creators who go off and do something like this. Like maybe it's something we do just for the Patreon. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be something that would go on the channel. It would just be something private, Okay. Now, Animesmon, I have heard RimWorld mentioned to me many times over the last couple of years as something that I should try and check out. And I have also heard about this Mountain Blade thing. Those are both games that I've heard about. And at least from what I heard, would sound like something that I would be very interesting. So that is definitely a possibility. KC says, it's gone past joking and into the land of the curious. It's like Django Unchained, gentlemen, you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention. But I wouldn't watch anyone play a strategy game. Oh, come on. You know what game has gotten the most play in my Steam library, in the last couple months, is Root. Root, the board game. All right, so I'm gonna end the poll. All right, 75% of you said that you would watch me play a video game, which is not a small. That is a majority. It's not 90%, but it is a majority. You've put hundreds of hours into RimWorld. Okay. My yes is very dependent on you being very bad at the game. Oh, well, that's a given, Sean. I'm not very good at video games. That's a lot lower than what I thought it would be. Listen, I respect that. In fact, if you voted no, I respect that because we are here for role-playing games, that is what we're here. It is more than a super majority. Look, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, maybe it'll happen someday, and just for the fun and the shiggles, and we'll have fun with that. No, but yeah, I really wish there was a way. Like I was saying at the beginning of the stream when I was getting a little bit not emotional, but I never dreamed that we would even make money with this channel, and the kind of support that all of you continue to show this channel and this community. They paint a picture for me, which is not nothing more than a sort of an ephemeral phantom at the very edge of my consciousness. But there is a future, very Doctor Strange, looking into millions of different futures, where I could see that this community grows up enough and is big enough and supportive enough that maybe this is something that one day I could do full time. Obviously, I would be, making a big risk by that. And, in a world where I do leave my job and health benefits and all that other stuff. But if I did, it would seriously be because I wanted to be able to talk about more things more often and be able to do like 3 or 4 live streams a week, or, a couple live streams and a couple videos a month, and just get more content out there, because I just feel like there's so much to talk about. There's just so many, amazing systems that I just feel like we haven't even I'm not even kidding you when I say that I could talk about Blades in the Dark for like 20 more hours than what we've talked about it on this channel. Like I could do a month where just every single live stream was just Blades in the Dark. And for me personally, still feel like I don't feel like I've quite gotten across why this mechanic or why this idea is so interesting. Just the other day, Strat and I, it was like Ayla, Strat, and I were like talking, and I think it was in KLC content chat, but it was about like this idea of social mechanics, GM fiat, and the role of dice versus the GM making a decision. And is the GM making a call inherently biased? Is it possible for the GM to act without bias, et cetera, et cetera? And we were talking about Blades in the Dark, and I showed this passage to Strat from Blades in the Dark, which he thought was shocking, because John Harper in Blades in the Dark said this line where he said, when we're having a conversation, when we're talking, right, we're just talking, we're just people talking, and there's an inherent desire to build consensus. There's an inherent desire to sort of everybody to arrive on the same page. He goes, we roll the dice in this game, specifically to fight against consensus building. We don't want to come to the mutually agreeable decision that we all sort of feel is the best way, because that tends to be very safe and that tends to be very boring. The dice make us have to stand up and pay attention. And it's just like that alone is just such a philosophical concept that is so radically different from what we are used to seeing in the RPG space and what we hear from sort of the zeitgeist of all these other, talking head creators, that it's just like, it makes you take a step back for a moment and you think, yeah, what are the real possibilities of this hobby, and how much of that am I leaving on the table by playing the way that I'm playing? So, any case, it's very, very, very good. Now I am very familiar with Stardew Valley because my roommate, she plays Stardew Valley, or not so much anymore, but she played for a very, very long time. And I actually enjoyed watching her play it. And I didn't sit there and watch her for hours and playing it, but it was pretty entertaining. Just watching her just build stuff and do stuff like that. I can get behind that. That's okay. Let's see. I mean, yeah, I think you could be inspired from everything. Anime is fun. I get inspired by board game mechanics, Magic the Gathering all the time. It's, it'd be really cool. Yeah, the regular stream slots, Frostjack, are going to become rare anyways, because we are going to be trying to play more RPGs on this channel. Like already Tuesdays are now going to be root actual play. So technically our streams are down to 1 a week. So it's like, I'm already trying to figure out ways to get more content out. How is fitness going? Good and bad. It's good in that I have I've pretty much given up on trying to cook for myself, and now I order Factor, which just is like high protein, balanced calorie meals. They mail them to you once a week. I get a big thing for it, and that has allowed me to sort of really control my eating, because it's just automatic and it's very limited. But and I'm still playing racquetball, and I'm still going for walks. I'm getting 12,000 steps a day or something like that. But I have not been lifting. I have just been so exhausted that it has been very, very difficult for me, even though my gym is in my room. So that is a big, and then it's like, it's like, oh, now I'm going to Origins. Oh, now I'm going to Gen Con. So it's been just very disruptive. I've had a lot of excuses, and I'm trying to, work my way through it. In terms of my weight, it's probably like, I'm probably down like 3 or 4 pounds total, which is much less than I thought I would want it to be. But at the same time, I haven't really been trying. So, but yeah, I started doing this meal prep. Yeah. Mighty Dave doing the same. It really does help. It makes just a big deal. It was not realistic for me to also, like, when I do meal prep, I'm getting off on a whole rant here, but when I do meal prep, it's like I end up, okay, I'm going to eat the same meal 5 times, 6 times this week. That is going to be very, very psychologically damaging to me. I like food, not like in a fat guy eat food. Like I am fat guy eat food, but like I love pretty much everything but guacamole. Like I don't like avocados. Like I like Chinese, Indian, Thai, Vietnamese, French, German. I love all the different, Mexican. I love all the different, cuisines. So just eating the same meal over and over again, it just makes me get bored. And then I end up going, oh, maybe I should, swing by the Jersey Mike subs, or maybe I should pop my head into this, restaurant. So the pre-made meals, but I'm also not going to cook 10 different meals for myself every week. It's just me. So the pre-made meals from Factor, they're basically like an expensive TV dinner, but a little bit higher quality, a little bit more expensive, and they come right to my door. So it's really super easy. And that is what I've been doing. And that seems to have been working out pretty well. Animesma says, nah, dude, you're a data scientist that makes the big dollars. I do okay. I mean, it's a great job, and it's a great company, and they are very, very awesome in how they treat their employees. So like, there's no reason that I'm like, if you had asked me this 5-6 years ago, when I worked at Progressive Insurance, I would have been like, my goal was to retire at age 42 because I was fucking tired of working. And I hated working there. I think it's a great company. I was just tired of working there. I don't feel the same way here. It's a very different type of pressure. I'm not in management. I don't have people reporting to me. And that means I can just focus on the work. And when the work is done, I'm done. So that has been very, very good for my mental health as well. When I was in charge of people and leading a team, it was very stressful to me, because I do get involved with other people. Really, I get emotionally involved with people, and that makes it difficult to be their boss. Isaiah is down for a month of Blaze in the Dark. I think that's a little ambitious, but I appreciate that you're on the same page. Don't make any more streams about other amazing TTRPGs. My wallet and small brain can't handle it. Boy, that is all of us. Frost Jack would also be down for a Blades month. Awesome. Build a game from scratch live during multiple streams. Listen, Claude, I'm not going to lie. Game design, I respect game design too much to do it badly. Now, I like to think that I have a pretty good mind for games. I've been playing them my whole life. I've tried to dabble in as many games as I possibly can. It's a hobby of mine, not just to play them, but to read them. And whether it's card games or board games, and in my youth, video games, and now TTRPGs, I feel like I have a lot of information up here. But taking that and making a good game out of it is something that I am both thrilled by the idea of and absolutely terrified to think that, because I'm like, look, I'm like the harshest critic in the world. So you think I would be easy on myself? No, I'd be sitting there going, dude, this game sucks. What are you doing? It works, but it's inelegant. It has tension, but it doesn't have any sort of a payoff. Where is your reward cycle? How is the player supposed to be motivated? Where is the inherent? I'd just be like defeating myself left and right. A base of chicken and rice with various veggies and sauces can make meal prep more varied. I mean, that is basically what I kind of, my go-to is kind of, I cook some chicken in the air fryer. Like when I do meal prep, I cook chicken in the air fryer. I cook rice in the pressure cooker, and then I add some sort of ethnic sauce with some veggies. That's kind of like my go-to base. There's something to be said about making your passion into a career, though, worth a pretty big pay cut, I think. I think so. I mean, at a certain point, money isn't everything. Obviously, I'm not at that point yet. But, if you'd asked me a year or 2 years ago, would our channel be making, several $1,000s a month? I would have told you no. But it is now, and obviously I'm not like other content creators. I do have other people on this channel that I try to take care of as well. They may not be live streaming, 6, 7, 8 hours a week like I do, but, Bob and Aaron and Alyssa, they do a lot for this channel. So, it's the money does get cut up a little bit between other people. But again, super appreciative to everybody. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I don't freeze things enough. And I have a chest freezer too, so which is stupid. I should freeze more things, but I don't know. I'm inherently, always forget about stuff in my freezer, and I never think it. And then I'm like, oh, I don't want to thaw it. Like, it'll take too long. I want it now. I want it today. All right, screw it. I'm going out and getting something. That's what happens to my mind every single time. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's that awareness that, like, when you do oh yeah. Exactly. That's a great quote. I've never heard that before, but that is absolutely good quote. Yeah. Like, I know what I like, but it doesn't necessarily mean I know how to make it, I do have, like I said, I have this dream of making a really cool dungeon crawler PBTA game. And you might say, isn't that Dungeon World? No, because Dungeon World is trying to be PBTA plus D&D, which is good for what it is trying to be. But I want to take, but Dungeon World's old. I mean, it's like the second or third major PBTA game after Apocalypse World. It's right up there with like Monster of the Week and Monster Hearts, much more older tech. And I really, really love some of the new PBTA tech that has come out, inspired by games like Torchbearer or other Luke Crane Burning Wheel emblems. Even some of the Blaze in the Dark tech. I'd love to figure out a way to make a really great PBTA game that was really good at doing dungeons and exploration and that kind of thing. I think that would be a really fun game that it tickles my fancy, because I really like Torchbearer, but some of the Burning Wheel mechanics miss me a little bit on the conflict resolution thing. I just don't feel like I have enough control. I love playing Blaze in the Dark and Powered by the Apocalypse because I love getting the control as the GM and being able to do what I want, but it's not like I can do it whenever I want to. I can only do it when the game says I'm allowed to do it, which means that I feel like it's okay to have all this power because there's a check, there's a check and balance. It's not just like I can do whatever I want whenever I want to. No, like the game is very clear. Like you could do whatever you want, but only when these certain circumstances occur, which is for me very freeing and very empowering. Are you the type of person that hates preheating the oven for things before putting them in? Oh, no. There was a world. I mean, I went to school originally to be a chemist, and I originally got into baking because I really loved chemistry, and baking was, basically chemistry that you could eat. That's a quote from Alton Brown. And so when I bake, it's like, I measure things out to the gram, and I'm very, very precise, and I absolutely make sure that the oven is the proper heat before I go putting anything in. Making terrible homebrew rules for existing systems states my desires to make a new system. Fair enough. I mean, we all have our own unique takes. All right, everybody. Thank you again for this great stream. I loved hanging out with all of you and shooting the shit. Appreciate every one of you for being here with me tonight. Remember to like this stream. Maybe some other people could see it. Maybe they'll like us. Maybe they'll like our community. Maybe they'll come join us. You all are a fantastic group of people to spend a Thursday evening with. And I certainly, or Friday morning with you, for some of you over there in Australia. I look forward to hearing from you all on the Patreon. I look forward to talking to you all there as well. And of course, to seeing you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye, everybody.